now getting our danger button right here, and also we are now getting this class name of button danger. So that was example one of the factory function, and now let me give you yet another example. So I'm gonna go ahead and define a components folder. So I'll use like components, and inside there we are going to be defining a few components. So I'll use like image card.tsx. Now I'll use my RAFC inside there. I'm gonna also create another component for the profile card.tsx, and I'm gonna use my RAFCE inside there, and I'm gonna also create a text card.tsx right here, and I'm gonna say RAFC inside there. Now these components are totally done. I'm gonna also create yet another folder for the shared. You can give it any name that you prefer, but in my case I'm just giving it the name of shared, and inside there we are going to be defining our card factory.tsx ORY. There we go. Now let me hit enter, and I'm gonna just define my RAFs. Oh, you know, we are not gonna be doing that right now. First of all, let me go ahead and go to the components folder, and I'm gonna go into the image card, and now let's just make that a bit cool. So I'll just remove them, and here I'm gonna specify a few classes to it. So I'll use like border, padding all around will be set to 10 pixel, and margin all around will be set to 10 pixel. And inside this div we are going to be providing our image, and for the source we are going to be taking there as a prop. So I'll just destructure there right here like image source, and also the alternative text, and I'm gonna annotate there as any. Okay, so let's just provide our image source right here, image source, and for the alternative text I'm gonna also specify like alt text, and we will also provide a bit of classes to it. So like width will be set to 5 frame, and also height will be set to 5 frame. Now let me just save this file, and that's totally done. I'm gonna close there. Now let me go ahead and go to my profile card component, and inside there I'll just remove this text. I'm gonna also provide a bit of classes to it like border, padding all around will be set to 10 pixel, and margin all around will be set to 10 pixel like so. And inside this div we are going to be providing our image, and for the image we are going to be providing there from our prop. So I'll just destructure the name, bio, and avatar. I'm gonna also annotate the as any, and now here I'll just provide my avatar right here, and also for the alternative text we're going to be providing the name, and also I'm going to provide a bit of classes to it like width will be set to 10 rem, and close there. So now underneath this image we're going to be providing our h3, and inside there let's just render our name, and I'm going to also provide a paragraph, and the paragraph will be set to bio. Now let me just save my file, and that's going to be it for our profile card, and I'm going to close there. Let's just go into our text card, and I'm going to just remove that from here. Or you know what, I'm not going to remove that, so I'll just remove that text, and I'm going to provide a bit of classes to it like border, padding will be set to 10 pixel, and also margin will be set to 10 pixel, and close there. So inside this div we are going to be rendering our paragraph of text which we are going to be getting from our prompt. So I'll just destructure there, and I'm going to annotate there as any. Now let's just close there and start working on our card factory, and based on that we are going to be rendering our component, like which component to render. So I'll just use like const card factory factory, there we go, and here we are going to be destructuring the type and also the data. And now let's just annotate the as any, and now let's just create our component. So first of all we are going to be using our switch and cases. So for the switch we are going to be providing the type, and if the type is set to image, in that situation we are going to be returning our image card. Okay, so let's just render there, and I'm going to also provide the image source src, and here is going to be coming from the data.src, and I'm going to also provide the alternative text, and for the alternative text we are going to be coming from the data.alt. And now let's just save them. I'm going to go back and remove this break from there. I'm going to also provide another case, and if the case is set to text, in this situation we are going to be returning our text card. And now let's just render there. It's going to take the prop of text, and here we have to provide there like as a data.text. And now underneath there if the case is set to profile, in this situation we are going to be returning our component like profile card, and I'm gonna close there like so. And here is gonna take a few props like name, and name will be coming from the data.name, and it's gonna also take the bio, and the bio will be coming from data.bio like so, and avatar will be coming from data.avatar. And if that's not the case, so for the default one we're going to be only returning our div, and it's gonna say like unknown r type or something like that. Now let me just save my file. I'm gonna copy a name of there, go to the bottom, and I'm gonna export there so that we can use them in other files. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and this is how we are going to be creating or defining our factory function. And now, and based on these conditions, we're going to be rendering our components. So now let's just close there and go to our app and start working on that. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to place a bit of data right here, and you can find this data in my GitHub repository. So first of all, we have our image card data, and inside there we have our image and also our alternative text. Then we have our text card data, and it only has this text, and this is just a simple card text right here. And then finally we have our profile card data. So inside there we have our name, bio, and avatar. So yeah, we are going to be rendering there. So I'm going to collapse there like so, and I'm gonna go back so you guys can see everything a bit better. Now here we are going to be rendering our components. So first of all, inside this h1, I'm going to make it as a React fragments, and now inside there we're going to be rendering our h1 is gonna say like factory design pattern in React. So now underneath there, I'll just use a div with the class of flex, and flex will be set to totally wrap. And inside this one, we are going to be using a factory function to render different cards. So I'll just use like card factory. And now here we are going to be providing first of all the type, and if the type is set to image, which means like we are going to be rendering the data of the image card, so I'll just use like data and then the image card data. And if the type is, let's just remove there. I'm going to render my card factory and close there. And if the type is set to text, so in that situation we're going to be rendering our data, and it's going to be set to text card data. Now underneath there, let's just use our card factory once again and close there. Here we're going to be specifying the type, and if the type is set to profile, then we are going to be rendering or passing our profile card data. Now let me just save my file, and that's going to be it. And here you can see we are now getting all of these cards right here. So for the type of image, we are now getting this card, and for the type of text, we are only getting this text card. And for the type of profile, we are getting the image, also the name, and also the description right here. So now let's just go ahead and go to our profile card, and yeah, we are now getting all of these stuff. So yeah, that was our factory function or our factory design pattern in React.js. Okay, so time for the dynamic component factory with advanced configuration challenge. So if it sounds a bit mouthful, of course it is. Okay, so what do you have to do? You have to create a component factory that dynamically generates a different UI components based on a specific configuration and ensure type safety for each component configuration. So what are the requirements? You have to define several components. First of all, like you are going to be creating a button, card, and model. At least I'm going to be just creating there, and you are more than welcome to create as many components as you prefer. And then you have to define a component config interface, something which we are going to be doing, and you should also do that by yourself. And then implement the factory. You already know how you're going to be creating a factory component, and finally just render your content dynamically. So I want you to read through there and then give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. So now let me just close there. And the first thing that I want to do is that, let me just even zoom in a bit. I'm going to just create a folder with the name of utils. So I'll just give it the name of like utils, and inside there I'm going to be creating a file with the name of component types.ts, and inside there we are going to be providing all of our types for our component props. So you know what, let's just start from the first one, which will be, let's just create our interface. I'm going to start by defining the model props, which will take these props. So it's going to take the header, and I'm going to paste a string inside there, and also the content, and the content will be set to string, and also the footer, which will be also set to a string. Now let me just export this so that we can use that in other files. So that was our first one. Now let me just create another one. So I'll just create an interface with the name of card props, and inside there it's going to take a title which will be set to a string. It's going to also take a content which will be set to a string. It's going to also take a footer which will be also set to a string. That's also done. The final one we have to create is button props. And now inside there, it's going to take a label, and we are going to be annotating there as a string, and it's going to also take the onClick event function. So we are going to be only returning the void from there. And also for the disable state, disabled, we're going to be setting there to boolean. Now let me just save this file, and that's it for our component type. So now let's just close there. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to create another folder with the name of components. So I'll just give it the name of like components, and inside there we are going to be creating 3 components. So first of all, we are going to be creating our button.tsx file, and inside there let's just use our RAFC inside there. And here what do we have to do? We have to go there, and we have to just destructure first of all the label which it is going to take, and the onClick event function. and the disable prop, disabled, there we go. And here let's just close there, and let me just change that to button, because we are going to be only creating this component for the button. So whenever somebody clicks on there, so we are going to be firing this function which it is now providing as a prop. And on the disable state, we are going to be also providing there from our props dynamically, like so. And for the content, let's just render that label which we are also passing as a prop. And I'm going to annotate this component with that button props which we just defined inside our component type. So here you can see we're going to be defining or providing this button props component or interface right here for our component. So now let me just close there. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our card component. So I'll just give it the name of like card.tsx, and inside there let's just use our RAFC inside there. And once again, it's going to take a few props like title, and it's going to also take the content. Come on, content is going to also take the footer. Okay, so now let me just render that content inside there. I'm going to also provide the class, or we're not going to be doing that. So now inside there, let's just provide our h3, and inside this h3 I'm going to render the title. We're going to be providing a paragraph and render our content inside there, and finally the footer. And here we have to just render our footer right here. I'm going to save this file right now, and I'm going to also annotate my component with that card props. Let me just import that from where? From our component.types file. Okay, so we are now just annotating our component with these props. So now let me just close this file. Now let me create another component with the name of model. So I'll just write like model.tsx, use my RAFC inside there, and here it's going to take a few prompts. So it's going to take the header, it's going to also take the content, and it's going to also take the footer. And I'm going to also annotate this component with the name of, or with the type of model props. There we go. And now let me just remove them from here, and I'm going to go inside there and provide my h2 inside there, and I'm going to just render my header as h2. And for the paragraph, we are going to be rendering our content, and also we have to render our footer. And here let's just paste our footer inside there. Now let me just save my file, close there, and here I'm going to also close there. And now I'm going to go into the utils folder, and inside there we're going to be defining our component factory. So I'll use like component factory tory.tsx. Okay, so now inside there, let's just we are not going to be providing our RAFC right here. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import our button component. We also have to import, come on, our card component, and we also have to import our model component. And now underneath there, we are going to be also importing our type. So I'll just import like the button props, and come on, this one, and we're going to be also importing our card props. And finally, we have to import one model props right here. I'm going to save this file right now. Next, we have to define our component or factory component. So now let me just go back, and here I'm going to just define my function, and this function will have the name of like component factory. You can basically give it any name that you prefer. And I'm going to just provide my config, because it's going to take a configuration. And now we are going to be passing a type of component config, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So now let me just close there, and here we have to create our component config so we can use there. So I'll just define the type, and I'm going to give it the name of like component, come on, component config is going to be equals to this type. And you know what, we're not going to be providing it like this, because we're going to be providing a lot of types. So first of all, we're going to be providing a type, and the type will be set to a button. And then we are going to be also providing a props, and props will be set to these props right here, which we already defined inside another file. So we can either use there, or we can use another type for another component. So I'm going to just provide that all right here, and we have to define another type for that another component. So I'll just create a type for the card component, and we're going to be passing these props to it. So I'll just pass like card props, and now let me just save my file, and this is how it looks like. And now let's just import the E1. Why aren't we even getting there? So we have these card props. Now let me just paste the card props. It is already defined, but I don't know why we are getting that error. Implicitly has any type. God damn it, my bad. We have to provide our props, and then we have to provide our type inside there. Now we are going to be also creating a configuration for another component, which will be for our model component. So I'll just paste like the props, and the props will be coming from that model props. Okay, so now let me just provide there, and that's totally done. So now that we are successfully creating these component configuration, and now we are successfully pasting them right here. So the next thing that we have to do is that we have to use them inside our component. So now let me just go there, and here we are going to be using a switch in cases, but you are more than welcome to use if and else statement. But now we are going to be providing that config, which you are now taking as a parameter, and we are going to be getting a type from there. Like each of them have a type, like that if the type is button, so do something, if the type is card, then do another thing, and so on and so forth. So now we are providing a configuration dot type, and here inside there we are just providing a different cases. So if the type is set to a button, in that situation, what do we have to do? We have to just return this component, which is a button component. Okay, so now let me just close that, and which we are also importing right here. Okay, so it's going to also take a few props, because we are now providing these props right here to our component. So I'm going to just spread out all of the config, and here, come on, config, and here we have to just access the props, and that's everything that we have to do for our button component. So now let me just close that and provide another case for the card, and here I'm going to just provide like return the card component, and I'm going to close that, and here let's just provide or dot config once again, and now we have to specify those props. Now we have to provide the final case for the final component, which will be for the model component. So now let me just paste them, and we are going to be only returning the model component in this situation. Now let me just also close there and spread out all of that config file. So let's just provide that config.props. There we go. And for the default, I'm going to just remove this break from here. We are going to be throwing an error, so throw new error, which will just say like unknown component type or something like that. Now let me just save this file. So this is how we are going to be defining our component factory. I'm going to also export that so we can use that in other files. So I'll use like export default of component, not config, but component factory. Now let me just save this file, and that's it for our component factory. I'm going to close that, and now let me go ahead and go to my app.tsx and call that right here. So I'm going to go there and remove that, and inside there we are going to be first of all we have to get there. So I'll just import the component factory. So I'll use like component factory. We have to import that and paste it right here. We have to execute that component, and it's going to require some sort of a configuration as we just provided right here. So now that we have to define those configuration, so let's just define the const button config, and it's going to be equals to this object, but we also have to go ahead, and I forgot to do that, but now let me just export that so that we can also use that inside this configuration. So I'll just annotate that with that component config. So let's just provide our component config right here. We also have to import that, and now we are going to be specifying the type, and the type will be set to a button, and we are going to be also providing a different props to that. So I'll just specify the label, and the label will say like click me. I'm going to also provide the on click event handler, like whenever somebody clicks on that. So what do you have to do in that situation? We just want to alert, and we want to say like you clicked me. I guess like you clicked me would be fine. Okay, and I'm going to also provide the disable state, and for the disable state initially we want to set that to false. Okay, so now let me just copy that and place that right here, save our file, and here you can see we are now getting this button, and whenever we click on that, so we are now getting like you clicked me. So this is how we are going to be defining or rendering our first component by using the compound factory component design pattern. And now let me just close them, and now we have to render that other component. So I'll just define like card config, and we also have to provide that component config right here. Inside there we are going to be providing a type, and the type will be set to a card, and the prompts will be set to, oh my god, what the hell was that? Okay, so it's gonna take a few prompts like title, and title will say like card title, and now we also have to provide some sort of a content, and I will say like some random content or something like that. And I'm going to also provide a footer, and I'm going to set that to footer, save our file. We have to provide our comma there. I'm going to copy the name of that, and now I'm going to just hit enter right here, and I'm going to also hit enter right here, duplicate this line of code, and instead of providing my button configuration, I'm going to specify the card configuration. And now here you can see we're now getting all of that value from those props like card title, some random content, and finally our footer. So yeah, that was it about for our complex challenge about the component factory. Now let's talk about the compound component design pattern. So the compound component design pattern allows for creating more flexible, reusable and easy to combine components. It involves splitting a complex component into smaller individual subcomponents that can be used together but maintain some degree of internal control over their behavior. So there was just a quick definition of what a compound component is. But now here is a bit note about the compound component. This pattern is useful when you want to create a component that has multiple subcomponents, but you want to maintain the ability to customize or control the behavior of each subcomponent from the parent or the container. Let's suppose if you want to build this card without using the compound component or without using the compound design pattern. So first of all, we have a title, then we have a content, and then we have a footer. First of all, we are just going to be creating some sort of a card which will take the title, content and footer. We will provide some sort of a styling to them, and then we can paste that title, content and footer as a prop to that component. This is good, but not that much. Suppose later if you want to change something inside the UI, so how in the world we are going to be doing that? Well, we can definitely do that, but that's going to be a lot of hard work, and we will very soon end up creating another component without just using that card component. Now let's refactor all of that code to use a compound component. So as we all know that functions in JavaScript are just an object, so which means like we can attach the properties, we can also attach another function, and we can do a lot of stuff with there. So now we are going to be treating our component as an object, and we are going to be attaching a different component to there as a properties and values. So what do I mean by all of that gibberish? So here you can see we are going to be extracting all of that UI logic from the card component, and we are going to be splitting them into multiple components. Like title, we are going to be putting that inside the card component. Same will goes for the card content, and also same will goes for the card footer. Okay, so we are going to be extracting all of that logic from the card component, and we are going to be putting them inside individual multiple components, and then we are going to be using that card component as an object, and we will attach some sort of a properties on there, and that specific property will be equal to that specific component, so that we can use them again and again. Once again, if you don't get it, you don't have to worry about that, because now we are going to be writing our code, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So now let's get into it. Let's talk about the compound component. So first of all, we are going to be creating our card without using the compound component, and then we will refactor our code to use a compound component. I can't even say that word, compound, what the hell. So you know what, let's just start working on this. I'm gonna go ahead and define my components folder, and inside there let's just define my card.tsx, and I'm gonna be using my RFC inside there. Go to my app and render that right in here. So I'll just use like card component and close there, and this card component will take a few props. So we are going to be first of all providing the title. It's gonna just say like card title or something like that. We're going to be also providing the content, and I'm gonna just say like this is the content of the card or some random stuff like that. We're going to be also providing a footer, so it's gonna say like this is the footer or something like that. Now let me just save my file and go into the card component and start working on this. So let's just zoom in a bit, and first of all we are going to be destructuring all of their prompts. So let's just destructure the title, the content and also the footer. So I'm going to define the interface for the card props, and here inside let's just provide the title, and the title will be set to string, the content will also be set to string, and the footer will also be set to string. So let's just provide them. I'm going to copy the name of them and annotate my component with this card props. And now inside there, what do we have to do? Let's just remove them. I'm gonna go back and provide a bit of classes to it. So let's just provide these classes. You can pause the video and write this styling by yourself, or you can go ahead and go to my GitHub repository and grab all of that styling from there. So I'm gonna just provide h2, and this h2 will say like title. Now underneath them, we're going to be creating another div, and inside this div I'm gonna provide a paragraph which will say like content. So I'm gonna just provide like content right here, and now underneath this div we are going to be defining yet another div with the class of footer, and I mean like the paragraph, and inside there we are going to be rendering our footer. So now I'm gonna fast forward the video, and I'm gonna provide a bit of classes to them, and you can also pause the video and provide these classes to your component. Okay, so you know what, let me just save my file, and here you can see this is how my card looks like I know it is looking super amazing because we are not using any compound component. So yeah, you get the idea. Like this is how we are going to be usually defining our card. But now the question is how in the world we are going to be making this card to use the compound design pattern. And that's very simple and easy. So what we have to do is that we have to take all of these stuff or all of these sections inside this card, and we have to create a separate components for them, and then we are going to be combining all of that components. Or you can say that we have to split this entire UI into multiple compounds. You can say that if you wanted to. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to define a few components. I'm going to define a component for the card and then card content.tsx. I'm going to also define yet another component for the card footer.tsx and also for the card title.tsx. And this should be a card title.tsx. There we go. Now inside the card title, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to cut this div from there, and I'm going to save this file and go ahead and go to my card title, and I'm going to use my RAFC inside there and replace that with this content right here. I'm going to also grab the children, so let's just use our children, and here I'm going to annotate the children as the React node, and now I'm going to copy these children from there and let's just paste it right here. I'm going to save this file right now, and that's going to be it for the card title. Now let me go ahead and go to my card content, but before I do that, I'm going to have to go ahead and go to my card and grab all of this content from there, save my file, go into my card content, and I'm going to use my RAFC inside there, and let's just place there with this new content, and I'm going to use my children once again and annotate there as a children and React node. Okay, so I'll just copy the name of these children and place it right here, save my file. That's done. Now finally, let me go ahead and go to my card once again, and I'm gonna have to cut this footer, and now let's just save this file, and I'm gonna go ahead and go to my footer and use my RAFC inside there and place it right here. I'm going to once again destructure the children, and here we have to annotate the children as a React node, and now I'm gonna copy these children and place it right here, save my file. And now as you can see, we created a separate compound component for this entire UI or for this entire card. Now the question is how in the world we are going to be combining all of them. And to combine them, first of all, let me just remove this interface from there and also this one. And this component will only take the children. And now I'm going to also annotate there as a children and a React node. And now I'm going to take this children from there, copy the name of there, and inside this div we have to just render there like so. And now the question is how in the world we are going to be combining this card content, footer, title, and all of that with this card component. You guys already know that in JavaScript, functions are just an object, which means like we can assign property to there, we can assign like different kind of stuff to there. This is how we are going to be treating this function or this component to attach properties and values to there. What do I mean by that? First of all, we are going to be accessing our function or component, whatever you want to call there. Then I'm going to use the dot notation, and here we can specify any kind of property and any kind of value for that specific property. So in my case, I'm going to just give it the name of like title, and you can give it any name that you prefer. Then now this card title will be set to this card title component, which we've already defined, and now we import it there right here. So now if I go ahead and go to there, so here you can see we have our card title component. So what are we doing? We are now accessing our card component, and then we are specifying a specific title to there, and now that specific title will be equal to this card title component. Okay, so this is how we are going to be attaching or combining those different compound with this main component. Okay, so I'll use like card.content in this case, and you can give it like any name that you prefer, and it's going to be set to card content. And now let's just grab this component right here, and also we are going to be using card.footer. It's going to be equals to card footer. Okay, like so. And now we are accessing there. Now let me just save my file. And now if I save this file and go ahead and go to my card, we are getting some sort of an error. So I'm going to just remove there, and I'm going to also remove there. And here we are going to be passing our card component, which will be our main component. And watch what happens. But first of all, we have to grab this card. And now I want you to watch what happens. So now if I just use card and dot, what are we getting? We are now getting all of that properties right here. We are now getting the content, footer, title, and so on and so forth. So now I can choose this title, and now let me just close there, and here I'm going to specify like something cool or something like that. And now if I just use card dot, we are now getting their content. So I'm going to choose this content and close there. And I'm going to say like amazing stuff or something like that. I'm going to also access the card once again. And finally we are going to be choosing this footer. And now I'm going to say like end, the end or something like that. Now if I save my file, here you can see we are now getting this amazing card. We can reuse this card. We can do a lot of stuff with there. Let's suppose in some situation, maybe if I want to push this amazing stuff to maybe either here or maybe at the top. So how can I go about doing them? Well, we just have to duplicate this card, and now we can just move this around. Like let's suppose if I want this one to be at the top, so now let me just save my file, and here you can see this is now at the top, and we can do a lot of stuff with there. So that was our compound component, or compound design pattern to be precise. Okay, so time for the compound component challenge. It sounds a bit mouthful, like compound component challenge. Anyways, so what do you have to do? You will have to implement the following features. So a model container that can house multiple child component, a way to control the visibility of the model, and also it should accept the title, body, and footer area within the model that can be customized with the content passed as a children. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now here is my solution. So I'm gonna go ahead and just define a folder with the name of components, and inside there we have to define a few components. So I'm going to go ahead and define the first one, which will be for the model title.tsx, and I'll just use my RAFC inside there, and that's going to be it for the boilerplate. And I'm going to just remove that. It's going to take the child because we already know it's going to require a lot of data. So we are going to be also annotating there as the React, or yeah, I guess the React node. And I'm going to just hit enter, and here we have to paste their child inside the H2. So I'll just paste them, and here we have to paste the children. There we go. And I'm going to also provide a bit of styling. So the text will be set to extra large, and the font will be set to semi-bold. Text totally gray of 800 would be fine. So let's space for 800, save our file, close there. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to define another component with the name of model body.tsx. And here let's just use our RAFC inside there. I'm going to go ahead and remove them, and I'm going to also provide a bit of margin for the top of 2, and inside there we have to provide our paragraph and render our children inside there like so. It should also accept the children here, so then we would be able to paste okay, children and React node, grab that, save our file, and finally we have to provide our classes so that we can style this. So text will be set to gray of 600, and text will be set to small. So our file, close there, and now we have to define another component for the model footer.tsx, and inside there let's just use our RAFCE, and here I'm going to remove that from there, and I'm going to also provide my children like so, and annotate my component as children React node like so. Now let me just save my file, and here inside there we are going to be defining yet another div, and I'm going to provide their children inside there. I'm going to also style it a bit. So margin for our top will be set to 4, justify will be set to totally not center but end, and spacing on the x-axis will be set to 2. I'm going to save this file right now, close there, and we also have to define the final component, which will be just a model component. So I'll just give it the name of like model.tsx, and here we are going to be combining all of their compounds into one simple component. So I'll just first of all import the model title. We would also need to import the model body. We would also need to import the model footer. There we go. And now underneath there we have to define our component right here. Now let me just save my file. It's going to take the children, and we also have to annotate there as the React node. And now let me just hit enter. So it's going to also import that right here. I'm going to also close there, and inside there let's just define another div, go back, and it's going to take those children like so. I'm going to also annotate that component like background totally white, and padding all around will be set to 6, rounded totally large, and width will be set to 20 rem. I'm going to close that right here. I'm going to also provide a bit of classes like fixed inset will be set to 0, background totally black, and background opacity will be set to 50, and flex justify will be set to totally center. Items will also be set to totally center, and the z index will be set to 50. Now let me just save my file, and this is how it looks like. But finally we have to combine all of that compounds into one simple component. So we are going to be using like model dot title, and it's going to be equals to that model title, and we also have to use the model dot body, come on, body, and it's going to be equals to model body, like so. And finally we have to use the model dot footer, it's going to be equals to model footer, like so. I'm going to save this file right now, close there. Now let me go ahead and go to my app component and use them. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import my my model component from there. And now we have to define our state first of all. So like is model open, and then set is model open is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to false. I'm going to save this file right now. Now let me go ahead and go to this div, and I'm going to define my button component, which will say like open. I guess open would be, or open model would be fine. And here we have to provide the on click event handler, like whenever we click on there. So we want to fire this function, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds, and also provide a bit of styling to there, like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, background totally green of 400, and also text of totally white and totally rounded medium, like so. Now let me just save my file. And here now underneath this button we are going to be rendering all of our content, and I'm gonna just comment this line out because we are going to be creating that in a few seconds. Okay, so here we have to first of all check, so is our model open or not. So if our model is open, then we have to show this content, but if our model is not open, then we don't want to show nothing at all. So I'll just render that model component, and now inside there we have to render our model dot title. And as you can see, if I just hit control space, we are now getting like body, footer, title, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just only choose this title right here, because now we are going to be providing some sort of a title for our model. So I'll just use like model title, and now underneath there we are going to be rendering our model dot body right here. And I'll just paste like this is the body of of the model or something like that. You can paste basically anything that you prefer, but in my case that's going to be fine. And then we have to render our model dot footer. And now let me just close there. And finally we have to just specify something inside the model footer, and I'm gonna just provide like button right here. Inside this button we are going to be first of all providing the cancel button, and now let me just duplicate the confirm button or something like that. And I'm going to also specify a few classes to there, like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, and pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, text will be set to totally white, background gray 500, and rounded totally medium, and also text will be set to totally small. I'm gonna save this file right now. Here we also have to specify a few more classes, like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, text totally white, background totally teal 500, and margin for the left will be set to 0.3 rem. And I'm gonna also specify a rounded totally medium and text totally small, like so. I'm gonna save this file right now, and whenever we click on this cancel button, so let's just use like on click. So we want to fire this function like close model. We are going to be closing our model because this is a cancel button, and then we have our confirm button. So yeah, it's gonna also close our model. So whenever we click on there, so close the model and confirm it. So now let me go ahead and go there, and I'm gonna uncomment this line out. I'm gonna copy the name of there and define my function right here. So I'll give it the name of like open model, and inside there we have to use the set is model open. Come on, now let me just copy there and place it right here, set that to true. And now let me just save my file, and now we are going to be creating this function, which is a close model. Okay, so now let's just use like const close model, and here let's just create that is model open and set there to false. I'm gonna save this file right now and refresh there. So here you can see we are now getting this open model button. If I click on there, so it's gonna open our model. If I click on this cancel, so it's gonna cancel or remove there. And now if I click on the confirm, here you can see it's going to also disappear or disable our model, and we are also getting this model title and also the body of the model. So yeah, that was it about the compound component challenge, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now let's talk about the slot design pattern. So slot design pattern allow a component to accept dynamic content from its parent and place that content into a specific area or section of a component. It sounds a bit like a props, isn't it? Yeah, of course it is, because in React.js there is no built-in slots. So we are going to be using a props to achieve slots. So the slot design pattern is not formal or native concept like some other design pattern in React.js, but it draws inspiration from the way slot works in the web component, especially in frameworks like Vue.js or Shadow DOM, or from pattern ideas from other UI frameworks. So yeah, you gotta know that slots are not built-in or native to React.js. So what are we going to be learning about the slots? So first of all, we are going to be learning about the default slot, then we are going to be learning about the name slot or multiple slot, and then compound slot, and finally we are going to be learning about the slot with context. So you know what, there's enough theory about the slots, and now let's just start from the first one, which is called the default. So default slot is known as a children property. So whatever you pass between the opening and closing tag of the component is passed as a children property to the component and acts as a default slot. So you know what, that's going to be it for the theory about the default slot. Now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about the default slot. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a folder with the name of components, and inside there I'm going to define a card.tsx, and I'll just use my RAFC inside there. Now let me go ahead and go to my app and register there right here. So I'll use like card, and I'm going to close there like this. And why is there? Let me just first of all import there, because now we are going to be using something called the default slots, or you can say the children inside this component. So you know, let me just write a comment like default slots. Okay, I guess that's going to be fine. Or you can also call them as a anonymous slots. So I'll use like anonymous slots. I hope the spelling is correct, but I'm not quite sure about that. So what I'm going to do is that I'll just write like h1, and it's going to say like this is my card title, and now let's just save there. I'm going to also provide a paragraph which will say like this is my card content, and I'm going to also provide a button which will say like learn more. Let's just try to learn and more. Now let me just save my file, and it is giving us an error because we have to use these children inside this component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to destructure my children, and I'm going to also annotate that as a React node. So now let me just grab that from the React.js, and I'm going to only use that inside this JSX right here. So now let's just save our file. Check this out. So here you can see we have our card title, we also have our card content, and then finally we also have our button. So I can also style that if I want to. So I'll just write like I don't know, maybe border would be fine. And here you can see we are now getting a background of totally black and text of totally white. Okay, so I'll use like text of totally white, and yeah, we are now getting that button right here. So this is how we are going to be passing a default slots or anonymous slots or children to our component. Now let's talk about the name slots. So the name slots or props are simply properties that we pass to a component, each with specific descriptive name, and these name props allow the child component to access and use these values based on the names they are given. So that's also it about the theory about the name. So now let's talk about the name slot. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open, or not open, but create my folder with the name of components, and inside there let's just define my card once again, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. I'm going to go ahead and go to my app component, and inside the app component I'll just call my card component like so, and I'm going to close there. And now here I'm going to pass some sort of a JSX as a prompt for my component, and I'm going to also give it some sort of a name too there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write a comment for myself like named slots. So now here I'll just pass like card title. You can also write a title if you wanted to, but in my case I'm going to write like card title, and here I'm going to pass some sort of a title as a JSX. So I'll use like h1, and it's going to say like this is my card title, and now let's just save there. I'm going to also provide the card content. It's going to say like a paragraph, and it's going to say like this is my card content, and I'm going to also provide the card button, and here it's going to only say a button. And now let me just provide a label of learn more, and I'm going to provide a class names of, I don't know, maybe background totally black, and also text of totally white too there. So now let's just go back, save our file. Now it's going to give us an error because we have to use that inside our component. So now let me go ahead and go to my component, and now let's just zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to destructure first of all my card title, and I'm going to also destructure the card content and also the card button like so. So let's just go back. Now let me just save my file, and we also have to define an interface for this. So I'll use like interface card props, and here inside there let's just use our card title and provide my React node to there. So I'll use like React node, hit enter, so it's going to import there, and I'm going to duplicate there like 3 times. Next will be for the card content, and finally we have a card button. Come on. And now let me just copy a name of there, and I'm going to annotate my component with this card props. Now let me just go ahead and go to my card, and what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to be rendering my card title, then we are going to be rendering the card content, and finally we have to render the card button like so. So now let's just save our file, check this out, and still we are now getting this UI. First of all we are now getting the title, then we are getting the content, and now we are getting the button, and which is looking cool. So yeah, this is how we are going to be passing a name slot for our component, and this is how we are going to be destructuring or getting there, and this is how we are going to be rendering there inside our card component. Now let's talk about the compound slots, or you can say the compound component slots. So the slot design pattern can be applied to the compound component by defining the name slot using the props, something which we just saw a few seconds ago. Customize the specific areas of compound component. This way each subcomponent acts like a slot that can be filled with a different content. So that was it about just a theory about the compound slot, and now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about the compound component slot. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside there let's just define our card.tsx. And you know what, first of all let me just write my RAFC inside this component, and I'm going to also create a card title.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. I'm going to also create one for the card content.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. And finally let me just create another component for the card not folder but card button.tsx would be fine, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. And now I'm going to go ahead and go to my card title component, and inside there let's just use our children, so I'll use like children, and here I'm going to annotate there as a children. You know, let's just close there, children React node. Now I'm going to copy a name of there and place there right here, just like there. Now let's just close this file. I'm going to go ahead and go to the card content, and I'm going to destructure the children, and I'm going to annotate there as a children React node, and now we have to annotate there like this. Okay, so I'm going to annotate there, close this file, close that file. Finally let me just go ahead and go to my button, and here we also have to destructure first of all the children, and we also have to annotate there with the React node, and I'm going to also go ahead and just render there right here. Now the final thing that I want to do is that I want to go ahead and go to my card component, and inside this card component first of all we have to import all of that component. So I'll just import first of all the card, then we are going to be importing the card content, and we also have to import the card yeah, card button. Yeah, I guess the card button. So first of all we have to write a card and then the button, and this is how we are going to be importing there. So next we have to create or destructure our children, and then we have to annotate their children with the React node like so. Okay, so I'm gonna copy a name of there and place it right here, and now we have to use there inside our component. So I'm going to just remove there. I'm gonna also make there as a React fragments, and here we have to pass our children. Next we have to provide our compounds to our specific card. So I'll use like card.title, and here we are going to be setting there to the card title. We also have to provide the card.content, and here it's going to be set to the card content. And finally we have to write the card.button. It's going to be set to the card button like so. Now that's done. So now let me just go ahead and go to my app and use there inside my app. So I'm going to just remove there, and inside this app component first of all we are going to be importing our card. And now if I hit dot, so here you can see we have our button, content, and also the title. So I'm going to just choose the title and close there, and I'm going to only provide my h1, and it's going to say like card title or something like that. Now underneath there we are going to be rendering our card.content, and now let's just provide some sort of a content to this. So I'll just use like card content, and now underneath this one we are going to be using our card.button, and here we have to provide some sort of a button which will say like click me or something like that. So this is how we are going to be using there inside our app, and this is the UI we are now getting. So we are now getting the title, then the content, and then finally we are now getting their button right here. So we can also style it if I want to. So I'll just use like background totally black and text of totally white. Now let me just save my file, and now we are getting this button right here. So yeah, this is our compound slots or whatever you want to call them. Now let's talk about how we are going to be using a slots with context API or just a context. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define first of all a few folders. So I'll just define like the components folder. Then we are going to be defining our context folder or shared folder. After that, we are going to be also defining the hooks folder. And inside there, we are going to be only storing a simple hook. Let's just start from the first thing, which is to create our context. So I'll just give it the name of like my context.tsx. And inside there, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab something called the create context from the React.js. And now underneath there, we're going to be creating our context. So I'll just give it the name of like my context, and it's going to be equals to this create context function. And now the initial value I'm going to specify undefined to there. I'm going to also provide a bit of types to there. So let's just create our interface. And now we have to use that interface for our context. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to annotate there like either use my context type or use undefined. So now let's just go back, and this is how we are going to be defining our context, but I'm going to also export this so that we can use that in other file. So now underneath there, we are going to be defining our provider. So I'll just first of all use like const my provider, and here is going to take like a children first of all, and now we are going to be using this, so we have to also annotate this. So I'll use like children from the React node. Okay, so let's just get there from the React node. It is not helping me in this situation. I don't know why, but you know, we are going to be importing them manually. So I'll just import something called the React node from the React.js. Now the next thing that we have to do is that inside this provider, we have to define some sort of a data which we are going to be sharing inside our components. So I'll just first of all define a state which will be set to a value, and then set value is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to like hello from context or something like that. Next we have to just return our provider. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just use like my provider, and here I'm going to specify my provider to that, just a provider like so. Or it shouldn't be provider, god damn it, my context to be precise. And now I'm going to provide the provider right here. And now let's just close there, and here we are going to be using our children, and we also have to provide the value which we are going to be sharing across our component. So I'll just use like value and also set value like so, value, there we go. And now let me just save there. Finally, we have to export this so that we can use that in other files. So I'll use like export, and that's totally done. So this is how we are going to be defining our context. And now let me go ahead and go to my hooks, and here we are going to be defining the use my context hook right here. So I'll just give it the name of like .ts. And first of all, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our context, and also we have to grab our my context which we just created a few seconds ago. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to actually define our custom hook. So I'll just export this so we can use that in other file. And now I'll just give it the name of like use my context, and here inside there, first of all, we are going to be getting the data from our context. So I'll just use like use context, and inside there we are going to be getting our data from our context. And now I'll just store then the variable with the name of context, and it's going to be set to this value. Now we have to provide a check if we don't have the context. So in that situation, we are going to be throwing an error. So I'll just use like throw new error, and I'll just space like use my context must be used within a my provider. Now let me just save my file, but if that's not the case, we are going to be only returning our context. So I'll just use like context which we are storing right here in this variable. So that's totally done. Now I'm going to close this file, and now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to go to our app and wrap our entire application. So I'll just remove there, and I'm going to also remove there, and I'm going to wrap my entire application by using my provider. I'm going to copy the name of that and place it right here. Currently we don't have any components to render, so now let's just create our components right here inside this folder. I'm going to go ahead and define my slots, or you know, it should be slot component. Come on, slot component.tsx file. And now here I'm going to just use my RAFC inside there with the name of slot component, and I'm going to also export that so we can use that. I'll also destructure the children, and I'm going to annotate that as a React node. Now let me just hit enter. Now let me just save my file, and inside this component, the first thing that we would do is that we would need some sort of a value. So I'll just use like use my context, and I'm going to execute that. And from this context, we are going to be destructuring that specific value, and now we can totally use that inside our component. So I'll just remove that. And now inside this div, we are going to be just writing like h3, and I'll say like context value and here we just have to render our context value, and I'm going to also provide a div, and here we have to just use our children inside there. Now for this children, we also have to create yet another component, so I'm going to close that one and define another component with the name of slot content dot, or not context but content. There we go, content.tsx. I'll use my RAFC inside there, and I'm going to also export that so we can use that anywhere else. And now here we are going to be using like use my context, and I'm going to execute there, and from there we are going to be destructuring the set value. And now let me just store that inside. We are going to be destructuring there, and now let's just use that inside our component. So I'll just remove that and replace it with the button and change this label to update context value. And now when somebody clicks on this button, so we just want to fire this function which is a set value, and here we have to just provide a new value to this. So I'll use like new value from slot content component or something like that, and that's totally done. So now let me just refresh there. Oh, we are now getting an error because we have to register there inside our app component. So now inside my provider, I'm going to first of all render my slot component, and I'm going to close that, and inside the slot component we are going to be providing our slot content, or yeah, not slot component but slot content. There we go. And I'm going to also close that like this, like a self-closing tag. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our value like context value, which is now initially saying like hello from the context, but as soon as I click on this button, here you can see it's going to change that value to the new value from the slot content right here. So yeah, this is how we are going to be using a slot with the context. Now let's talk about yet another design pattern, and I guess the last design pattern of this course, which is called the render prop. So the render prop design pattern is used to share code between components by passing a function as a prop to a component. So this function, which is typically referred to as a render prop, return a React element that gets rendered. So this pattern allows a component to be more flexible and reusable, as the parent component can control the rendering of the content in its child component. So you know what, let me just give you an example of that. Here you can see I'm now calling my component, and I'm passing a render as a prop, and inside there we are now passing a function which is taking a count as a parameter, and now we are returning some sort of a JSX which is saying like the current count is that specific count. Now we have our component, and inside that component we are now destructuring that specific function or prop, whatever you want to call that, and now we are using that inside our JSX, and here you can see we are now passing a count to there. So you know what, let me just write some code, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So now let's see the render prop in action. So first of all, we are going to be creating our components folder, and inside there we have to create our component.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. And now let me go ahead and go to my app and render this component right here. So I'll use like count, and now let's just render there, and I'm going to close there. And now we are going to be passing our render prop as a prop to this component. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? Well, first of all, we have to create some sort of a prop. And by the way, you can give it any name that you prefer, but in my case, I'm going to give it the name of like render. And here we are going to be passing our function. And now let's just use our paragraph, and it's going to say like the current count is, and now let's just render our count, which this function will take as a parameter. And now let me just paste that. And we are going to be also returning a number from there because it's going to be a number. Now let me just save my file, go back. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to use this render prop inside our component. So let me go ahead and go to my component, and first of all we have to destructure there so that we can use that. Now let me just save my file, and now inside this component we have to create our state. So I'll use like count and then set count. It's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to 0. Now let me just save this file, and the next thing that we have to do is that we have to render our component or our function to be precise. So I'll use like render, and here we have to pass that count inside there. So as soon as I do that, and we are now getting a TypeScript error, so I'll just annotate that with any. Here you can see we are now getting the current value of 0 inside there, and I can also change that to like 10, and it's going to give us that 10 value, and so on and so forth. Now let me just create a button which will allow us to increment or decrement our counter. So I'll use like button, and I'll just say like increment, and when somebody clicks on there, then we want to fire this increment function, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So now let me just copy the name of that, go back and const increment, and then we are going to be only incrementing our counter by 1. So I'll use like count plus 1, save our file, and now if I click on there, so it's going to increase my counter by 1. So let me just set that to 0 once again, save this file, and as soon as I click on there, it's gonna just increment my counter right here. So this was just a simple example of a counter component. Now let me give you yet another example. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my app, but first of all we have to create something called the mouse tracker. So I'll use like mouse tracker.tsx component. I'll use my RAFC inside there, go to my app, and now I'm going to just remove this component from here. I'm going to also remove that from there, and now let me render my mouse tracker component and close that. Here we are going to be passing our render, and inside this render we have to provide our function. So I'll use like position, and position will be set to any, and inside there let's just create our paragraph. So I'll use like paragraph. It's going to say like mouse is at this position. So I'll use like, come on, first of all let's just provide one position, and then I'm going to provide another position. So I'll just provide first of all the position, and position will be set to, and also I'm going to provide my position, and position will be set to Y. Now let me just save my file, and it shouldn't be I'm treating it as an object. It should be just position dot, like so, position dot X and position dot Y. And now let me go ahead and go to my component and use this render prop inside that component. First of all, we have to destructure this so that we can use the inside our component. Next, we have to define our position. So I'll use like position and set position, and it's going to be equals to the useStat. Come on, useStat. And the initial value will be set to X, and X-axis will be set to 0, and Y-axis will be also set to 0. Okay. And next, we have to go ahead and go to our UI, and then we have to render our position or our render prop. So I'll just use like render, and here inside there let's just provide our position inside there. And I'm going to also annotate there as any for the TypeScript to go away. And now we are getting a mouse at 0 position, and also on the y-axis of 0 position. We can totally change there to like 10 and 20 maybe, like so manually. Now we are getting like mouse is at this accordion. I'm gonna go there, and this should be x-axis, and this should be a y-axis, and now that's looking better. So the next thing that I want to do is that I want to set that to 0 once again. I'm going to also set the y-axis to 0 once again, and now we are going to be attaching the mouse move. So I'll use like on mouse move, and when our mouse is moving, so in that situation we are going to be firing this function which is a handle mouse move, and we are going to be also providing a bit of styling to this. So I'll just provide like height, and the height will be set to 100 VH. Now let me just save my file and create this function right here. So it's gonna track our mouse cursor. So I'll use like const handle mouse. It's gonna take the event, and I'll just annotate the as any, and I'll just provide my set position, and inside there we are going to be getting the X value, and X value will be set to that event object, and we only want to get the client X-axis. And then for the y-axis we want to get like event, and we only want to get the client y-axis in that situation. So now it's going to give us the perfect accordion. Anytime I move my mouse, it's going to give us a different accordion. So it's going to give us the x value, and it's going to also give us the y value. So yeah, this is how we are going to be creating our render prop, and then this is how we are going to be using the inside our component. So this is going to be basically the most simple challenge in this entire course. So what do you have to do? Basically you have to just create the data fetcher component by using the render prop design pattern which you just saw a few seconds ago. So you need to create a reusable data fetcher component that fetches the data from the API and passes that data to its child component using the render prop design pattern. So the child component will receive their data and can render it however it chooses. So basically you'll need to perform these 3 steps, like first of all the data fetcher component, then the render prompts, and you'll also have to keep in mind the error handling. So let's just start from the first one, which is a data fetcher component. So the data fetcher component should take the URL as a prop and fetches the data from that specific URL. So while the data is being fetched, the component should show a loading spinner or some sort of a message in that situation. And once the data is fetched, the component should pass the data to its child through a render prop. So then the render prop will receive that data via the render prop and renders it however it wishes. Like basically you can just provide any kind of UI for them, and you will also provide a TypeScript for them. So finally you will also need to take care of the error handling, like if there is some sort of error, so you have to show that specific error to the browser or to the user. So these are the expected outputs. So like while the data is being fetched, show a loading spinner or some sort of a loading message or something like that. And once the data is being fetched, render the list of users. And if there is an error, for example like wrong URL or network issues, then show that specific error. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now here is my solution. So I'm gonna go ahead and just create a component folder. So I'll just create like components folder, and inside there we are going to be creating two components or files rather. So I'll just start from the data fetcher.tsx. So now let me go ahead and just define my component with the name of data fetcher, and I'm gonna also annotate that as a type generic. It's gonna just render a few things. So first of all, we need to destructure the URL and also the render prob. Okay, so then we have to create an interface for that so that it will not give us that TypeScript error. So now let me just define my interface with the name of data fetcher props, and here we have to specify the type of generic, and it's going to take the URL and we have to annotate it as a string. We also have to specify the render prob, and it's going to take the data, and we have to specify the it's going to also take the type generic or the null value. And I'm going to also provide the is loading, so whenever it is loading, so there's going to be a boolean. And we also have to specify the error, so it can be either a string or null. And now we have to paste there as a jsx.element. Come on, dot element, like so. Now let me just save my file, but why in the world I'm providing a semicolon there? We have to specify a comma there and comma there. I'm gonna copy the name of there. Let's just copy there, and I'm gonna annotate my component with these props. And now inside there, and here we also have to specify the type generic. And now inside this component we have to define a few states. So first of all, we are going to be defining a state for the data. So I'll just give it the name of const data, because inside there we are going to be storing our data. And then set data is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to null. And here we have to specify either the type generic or null value. Next we have to define the loader. So I'll use is loading, and then set is loading is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to true. And now underneath there we have to define the error, and then set error is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to null. And we also have to annotate our component to either take a string or null value. So that's going to be it for our states. Next we have to fetch our data by using the use effect. So now we are going to be performing the side effect. So in that situation we have to use our use effect. Okay, so now inside there I'm going to be passing a lot of things, but first of all we have to provide the dependency array. And for the dependency array we are going to be only passing that URL which we are now taking as a parameter. Okay, so whenever that URL changes, so we want this function or this component to re-render. Okay, so what do we have to do? We have to use set is loading, and initially we have to set that to true, and then the set error we have to set that to null. And now we have to fetch our data. So now we are going to be using that fetch. You can also use xuse if you wanted to. And now we are going to be passing that URL as you can see right here, and based on that specific URL we're going to be fetching our data. So now let's just use the dot then and the dot caches and all of that stuff. So let's just get the response, and response.json, convert that data to the JSON. And then finally we have to use our data. So it's going to give us that data, so we have to provide that data to our state. So I'll store that data inside the state, and let's just use our set is loading and set that to false. Now let me just save my file, and that's totally done. And what about the catch? I'm going to just write dot and catch statement, and here we only have to specify that error. And inside there we can use set error. If we got one, then we're going to be rendering that to our error state. So I'll use MESSAGE, and then set is loading and set that to false initially. Now let me just save my file, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data by using this use effect. Now let me just close there. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to return that render prop, or pass all of that data to that render. So we are going to be passing the data and also the is loading and also that error, and we have to just return that from this data fetcher component. Now let me just copy the name of that, and now we have to export that so that we can use that in other file. Now let's just save our file, close there, and now let's just use that inside our component. So I'm gonna go ahead and just define my users component users.tsx, and I will just use my RFC inside there. Now let me go ahead and just remove that, and we have to render our data what do we call it, data fetcher component, which we just defined and close there. Not like this, but like this. There we go. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to specify our URL. So I'll just paste like URL, and we're going to be fetching our data from this specific URL, which is this JSON placeholder.typei code, and then that specific users. I'm gonna also define an interface for this, so let's just define there. I'm gonna give it the name of like interface user, and inside that let's just paste the ID, and the ID will be set to a number, and also the name will be set to a string. Now let me just copy there from there and annotate my component with that user. So let's just paste there, close there, and paste that array inside there. So this is how we are going to be fetching our data, but now we also have to tell like how we are going to be rendering that data. So I'll just use like render, and here inside there we have to render our data. So I'll just paste like data that is loading, which we are also fetching. Come on, is loading, and also the error. Okay, so now let's just go back from there, and inside there we have to first of all check, let's just save our file. Inside there we have to first of all check if we have some sort of an error. So in this situation we are going to be returning the div, and I'll just say like loading dot dot dot, and I'm going to also render that div right here. Save this file. And what about the error? If we have some sort of an error, so in this situation let's just render like, and then we have to render that specific error right here, ERROR. There we go. Now underneath there we have to return our content so that we can see them on our UI. So I'll just return like UL. I'm going to use that UL right here, and inside there use the data. If we got the data, then we are going to be iterating over through that data. So I'll just go ahead and provide my li, and for this li we are going to be providing a user.name. Okay, and here we also have to specify the key, and the key will be set to user.id. Now let me just save my file, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data, and this is how we are going to be rendering our data, and so on and so forth. So finally the moment of truth, and we are still getting that app. That's because we have to go ahead and go to our app component and render our users component inside there, close our file. And what the hell is going on? Let's just close there. Now let me just refresh this. So here you can see we're now getting all of that users right here from that API. So this is how we are going to be fetching our data, and that was it about the render prompts design pattern in React.js. Let's talk about the 10-stack query. So 10-stack query, previously known as a React query, is a popular library used in React application for managing server state and handling asynchronous data fetching. It provides a set of hooks that simplify the process of fetching, caching, synchronizing, and updating data in React application. So that was just a quick definition of what a 10-stack query is. But 10-stack query is also a framework agnostic, which simply means that you are not only limited to use that inside the React.js. You can use them with different frameworks and libraries like Vue.js, AngularJS, and so on and so forth. But it is commonly used in the React community. So yeah, that was just a definition of what a 10-stack query is. And now let's get into the setup. Then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So now let's make a setup for our coding journey. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal, and I am going to make a setup for the React.js. I'll use npm create vite at latest. And now I'm going to give it the name of like 10 demo or something like that, or 10 stack demos would be fine. So I'll choose React.js with TypeScript. Now I'll go into the 10s demo, and now I'll install every single thing inside there. Now that's successfully done, so I'll just clear this out. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to go to the 10-stack query, and now we are using the version 5 of 10-stack query. So they are now calling themselves like powerful asynchronous state management for TypeScript and React.js in, TypeScript with JavaScript, React.js, Solid.js, Vue.js, Svelte, and also Angular. Okay, so yeah, if you want to install that, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to go ahead and go to this docs. Now here you can learn a lot of stuff about there, but I'm going to click on this installation, and now let me just copy this link, and now let's just place it right here, and I'm gonna just hit enter, so it's gonna install that in my machine. So yeah, that's totally done. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go to my tailwindcss.com and click on the getting started, go to the framework and guides, choose Vite, and now I'll just copy this line of code or command to be precise, and now let me just place it right here. So it's going to install the Tailwind CSS inside my project. So now I'm going to just hit enter, so it's going to initialize my Tailwind CSS right now. And now I'm going to just copy there. And now first of all, we have to open that folder inside the VS Code. And this is how it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the tailwind config file, and I'll just replace that content with this new one. Next, I'm going to copy this index.css directives. And now let's just go ahead and go to this index.css file, remove every single thing from there and replace it with this new one. I'm going to remove the public folder, and I'm going to also remove the ss folder, remove the app.css, go to the app.tsx file, remove every single thing from there, and I'm going to use my RFC inside there to create my initial component. Now let me just copy this line of code, and now I'm going to place it right here so that we can see everything is working or not. So I'm going to use like npm run dev, and now let's just test this out. Okay, so yeah, everything is working the way we expect him to work, and that was our entire installation. And now let's get into the 10-stack query in a more great detail. Now let me show you how we are going to be fetching and managing that data without using the 10-stack query, and then we are going to be refactoring that code to use the 10-stack query. So what I'm going to do is that I'll just close all of that files, and here I'm going to just define a components folder, and inside there I'll just create a component with the name of like without 10-stack query.tsx. I'll just use my RAFC inside there, and now let's just go into the app.tsx file, and now I'm going to register that component right here. So without a 10-stack query, now I'm going to save this file, and here you can see we're now getting this message, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to define my stats. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just define a stat for the ID, and then set ID is going to be equals to the use stat, and the initial value will be set to 1. Now I'm going to create a stat for the data, and then set data is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to null. Yeah, definitely you can provide your TypeScript and all of that stuff, but I'm not going to. So now we are going to be creating a stat for the is loading, and also set is loading, and it's going to be equal to the use state once again, and the initial value will be set to true. Now we have to define a stat for the error, and then set error, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to totally null. Now underneath them we have to now fetch the data, so which means like we have to do some sort of a side effect. So I'll just use my use effect, and the initial value, I mean like not the initial value, but for the dependency array we are going to be only providing that ID, because we are going to be creating some sort of a button, and anytime we click on that button, so it's going to fetch a new data. So now I'll just import that use effect from the React.js, and now let's just do a bit of side effects. So first of all, we have to define our race condition. So I'll just use like RC for the race condition. It's going to be set to false. And if you guys don't know what a race condition is, you don't even have to worry about that, because 10-stack query will handle that behind the scene for us. So now we have to create a function. So I'll just use like handle fetch, and it's going to be equals to the asynchronous function. And now inside there, first of all, we have to get the set is loading, and we have to set that to true. Now we have to use the set error, and we have to initialize that to the null value. And now underneath there we have to use the try and catch blocks. So for the catch block we have to specify some sort of an error, and it can be anything. And now I'll just use like set error, and here we have to specify like error.message, and we're going to be also providing the finally. So I'll just use like finally, and here let's just use our set is loading and provide the false value to there. Okay, now for the try block, what do we have to do? We have to fetch the data. So I'll use like const trace, and it's going to be equals to await and then fetch. And here inside there, now we are going to be fetching the data from this URL, which we've already used in like almost all of my courses. So we are now fetching more data from the JSON placeholder.typicode.com/to-dos. And now we are going to be fetching that data from a specific to-do. Now underneath there we have to take care of the race condition. So if we have the race condition, in that situation we are going to be returning our data. But if that's not the case, we have to do a check. So if we don't have the response okay, so in that situation we are going to be throwing a new error. Okay, so I'll use like error fetching data. Now we have to render our response.statistics like so. And now let me just save my file. And now finally we have to convert our data to the JSON response. So I'll just use like await, then response.json, and now we have to store it in some sort of variable. So I'll use like const response, or you know what, result would be fine. And now we have to set that set data, and we have to specify the result, or all of that data to there. So now that's totally done. Now we have to execute this function. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy a name of there, and we have to execute this function right here. Now I'm going to also provide a cleanup function for the race condition. So I'll just return this data, And now from this data, I'll use like RC for the race condition. Now it's going to fetch all of that data. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to render that data to our UI. So what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm going to be checking like if we have the loading state. In this situation, we are going to be using the H1. We have to provide like loading dot dot dot. And now if that's not the case and we got some sort of an error, so in that situation, we are going to be using the H1 and we have to render that specific error. But if we have the data, so in that situation, we are going to be only rendering that data by using their JSON stringify. So I'll use like JSON.stringify, and here we have to specify our data inside there. Now if I save my file, here you can see we are now getting all of that data. So if I just refresh that, we are now getting that loading loader, and also now we are getting our data, which means like everything is working the way we expect them to work. But now I'm going to be creating a button, and here for this button we are going to be just saying like next or next page, and when somebody try to click on there, then we're going to be finding this function which is a set ID. And now here we have to specify our previous ID to there, and now we have to use our previous ID plus 1. And also I'm going to be providing a bit of classes to this. So I'll use like pairing all around will be set to 20 rem. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting this huge button, but you know, let's just change that to like maybe 3 rems. And now I'll also change the color of that to like background totally black and text totally white. Now let me just save my file. It is still looking supremely big. And yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. So if I click on there, here you can see it's gonna give us another data and another ID. So if I click on there once again, it's gonna fetch our data, and now it's gonna show our data. But I want you to notice, like here you can see we have to do all of that stuff for just fetching our data. Like here you can see we have to define the state for the ID, then for the data, then for the loading, then for the errors, and also we have to take care of the race conditions. And by the way, if you guys don't know what a race condition is, you don't have to worry about that, because now 10-stack query will handle that for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Now let me just expand there. First of all, you have to take care of your loading logic, and then you have to write a lot of try and catch blocks, and then you have to even check for the responses, and then finally you have to send your data. You have to also take care for the catching, and then you have to take care for the error logic, and finally logic, and there's a lot of hurdles. And here you can see you also have to take care of the loading logic and also the data, and then finally you're going to be showing some sort of a data to your UI. So yeah, this is like cool. You totally can write your code like this, but just imagine for a second, like if you want to fetch a lot of data in a lot of components, it can get totally messy and totally tedious. So for this kind of situation, we are going to be using something called the 10-stack query, and trust me, you are gonna love that a lot. So you know what, let me just refactor this code. You know, we're not going to be refactoring this code, so we are going to be starting from scratch, and then we are going to be refactoring this code to use the 10-stack query. Let's talk about that query client thing which we just saw a few seconds ago. So if you said that query client is the heart of 10-stack query, you won't be wrong. You will be totally correct. But you know what, let's just explore that a bit more. So the query client is the core object in 10-stack query that manages the state and configuration of queries and mutation in our applications. It serves as the primary API for interacting with the library, and by library I mean the 10-stack query library, enabling us to perform actions like fetching the data, managing the cache, and setting up the global configurations. So as I said, that query client is the heart of the entire 10-stack query. So yeah, you know, let me just explore that a bit more. The first thing that we did is that we imported the query client, which is just a heart of the 10-stack query. From where? From the 10-stack query, from the React query. Next, we created the instance of the outside from all of our component. Here you can see there, and now we have to use that inside our entire applications. So for that we use the query client provider, which is just a context, and now it is taking the client, and now for the client we are now providing this query client. Basically all of that code simply means that we want to use that 10-stack query inside our entire application. You can think about this code is like this, like basically this entire thing which we just imported, and we created the instance of that, and now we are providing the or even wrapping our entire application by using our query client provider context. This all code simply means that we want to use our 10-stack query inside our entire application, and that's it. Now let's talk about the main hook from the 10-stack query, which you're going to be using like 99% of your time. maybe not 99% of your time, but I guess 70 or 80%. So I'm talking about something called the use query hook from the 10-stack query. So this is how we are going to be using there. First of all, we are going to be writing the use query. It's going to take an object, and inside that object we are going to be providing a query key as a key, and for the value we are going to be providing some sort of a unique key to there. And don't you worry, because we are going to be explaining all of them one by one. And after that, we are going to be using another property which is called the query function or query fn. And then we are going to be specifying some sort of a function which will allows us to fetch our data. So you know what, let me just break this down one by one. First of all, we have the use query, which is a function that helps us fetch and manage server data in our applications. Then we have a query key, and then now we are specifying a to-dos to there, and you can specify anything to there. Like you can specify, I don't know, it's gonna totally depend on your situation where you're using there. But in my case, I'm gonna be fetching some sort of a to-dos, so that's why I specify to-dos inside there. So this is a unique identifier for the query. It's like a label saying like we are working on that specific items or that to-dos in my case. And finally, we have our query function, and now we are specifying a fetch data function to there, and this specify the function which is a fetch data that will actually get the data, and it will be called to retrieve that to-do items. So yeah, that was just the basic theory about the use query hook, and now let's just use that inside our apps. Okay, so I'll just close there, and now I'm gonna go ahead and go to my components folder, and now we are going to be creating another component which will be a with 10-stack query.tsx. I'll use my RFC inside there. Let's just go ahead and go to our app, comment this line out. Now we have to return the with 10-stack query. So now let me just write there, save my file, close there, and here you can see we're now getting our with 10-stack query, which is looking cool. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to import something called the use query function or hook. From where? From the 10-stack query. So I'll use like use query, and next we have to use there. So I'll just use like use query, and inside there we have to specify our object, and for this object we are now going to be providing the query key, and that's going to be set to an array, and inside this array we are going to be specifying some sort of a unique key to there. I'm going to provide a comma. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to provide a function which will allows us to fetch our data. So we have to use our query function, and now we have to specify some sort of a function for there. So I'll use like fetch data as my function, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So I'll use like const data, and it's going to be equals to this use query function. And now outside from there, I'm going to just create that function right here. So I'll use like const fetch data, and it's going to be a function. It's going to be basically an asynchronous function, because now we are going to be using, or what do we call it, asynchronous operation. So that's why it's going to be an asynchronous function. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to fetch my data. So I'll use like fetch, and we want to fetch our data from the HTTPS, and then JSON, come on, JSON placeholder dot type icode dot com/to-dos. Now let's just store the inside the response variable, and now let me just save my file. Next we have to check for the response. So if the response is not okay, so I'll use like response is not okay. In this situation we're going to be throwing a new error, and it's going to say like network response was not okay. And finally we just have to return the response.json. So I'll use like response.json, and I'm going to execute there, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data. And by the way, I know a lot of you thought that 10-stack query is only used for fetching the data, but that's not the case. We are now fetching our data by using this fetch method. We can also use XUse for fetching the data, but 10-stack query will not only allows us to fetch our data, it's gonna also allows us to manage that data, which means like we don't have to create a state for the loading, for the errors, and so on and so forth. We don't have to specify the try and catch blocks. We don't have to take care of the race conditions and a lot of more stuff. So you know what, let me just log that data to the console. So I'll just use the console.log of data, and now let me just save my file. Now I'm gonna right click on there, go to my inspect element, go to my console. And yep, we are now getting their data right here. So there is something wrong inside the JSON placeholder. I'm not quite sure about that. So, you know, let's just close there. Here you can see I'm now providing triple T's right here. So let's just change there to this URL. So now let me just save my file, and now let me just refresh there, and here you can see we're now getting our data. So first of all, we have our data, which is now array of 200 arrays. and we also have like error, we also have the failure and is error, and we have a lot of these flags which we are going to be destructuring in a few seconds. So we also have like, is it loading or not? So currently it is not loading, so it's going to give us a false. Paused or not? So yeah, this is not paused. Is it pending or not? Yep, it is not. So is it stale or not? So yeah, it is true. And stale is something which we are going to be exploring in a lot more great detail, but not right now. So we are going to be destructuring a lot of things, but now you get the idea that 10-stack query will not only allows us to fetch the data, but it's going to also allows us to manage that fetch data. So, let me just close there. So to prove my point, I'm going to also install the Axios library, and I'm going to also show you that we can also fetch our data by using the Axios. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal, and if you guys don't know what Axios is, you don't even have to worry about that. So I'll just use like npm I and then Axios. So it's going to install there inside my project, and now that's totally done. So I'll use like npm run dev, and I'm going to comment this line out. And now let me just create another function which will be a fetch data, and here we are going to be using that asynchronous operation once again. Now let's just use like response and then await and Axios. Let's just get there from the Axios first of all. And now we can use the get method and so on and so forth. So I'll only use the get method, and inside this get method I'm going to copy this link, and now let me just place that link right here. And now we are going to be only returning that response right here. Okay, so yeah, or it's going to be a response.data to be precise. And now we can totally log that to the console. Now let me go ahead and go to my inspect element once again and go to the console, and let's just refresh there. Now we are getting that data, we are also getting that error and so on and so forth. So now you get the idea that here you can see we can also use Axios, we can use fetch, and we can use a lot of things. So this is how the syntax will look like. First of all, you have to import the use query, and then inside the use query you are going to be providing an object. Inside this object, the first key will be a query key, and it's going to take a unique key. You can specify like different kind of keys if you wanted to. You can provide like even a gibberish if you wanted to, and then you have to specify the query function which will allow us to fetch our data. You can definitely copy this entire thing and you can place it right here, but in my case I'm not going to, because I know it's gonna look a lot ugly, and now I'm teaching you all of that stuff. So you know what, I'm gonna have to just stick with this convention. So that's totally done, and now that you get the idea that how in the world we are going to be fetching our data. But now let me show you that we no longer have to create a state for the is loading, like we're going to be writing like is loading, and we no longer have to create a state for like is error and so on and so forth. We can totally destructure that from our 10-stack query. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? We can just use this destructure method or syntax, whatever you want to call that. We can totally destructure the data, which will be the actual data which we are now fetching. We can also destructure the error, and we can also destructure the is loading, and we can do a lot of stuff. So now that we successfully destructured them, and now we can totally use that right here. So if you have some sort of an error, so I'll use like if it is loading. So in that situation we are going to be only writing this h1 which will say like loading dot dot dot. And if you have some sort of an error, so in that situation we are going to be only creating a paragraph. It's going to say like an error occurred at this location or at this position. So I'll write like error dot message, and now let me just save my file. And finally we have our data which we can now render to our UI. So I'll just close them, and inside this div I'll just write my h1 which will be a data. Now underneath there, let's just write our pre, and here inside there I'm going to be using like json dot stringify, and here we have to pass our data and null value and also our 2. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our data, and we have a lot of data right here. So we can now scroll through there, and now that you get the idea like how in the world we are going to be using our 10-stack query to fetch our data. So yeah, it is as simple as that. Let's talk about another concept in 10-stack query, which is called the deduplication. So the deduplication means that if we try to fetch the same data multiple times at once, so it will only send one request instead of many. Deduplication helps avoid asking for the same data over and over again. So that was just a quick theory about the deduplication, and now let me show you that in action. So here you can see we have our cache, which is just an object, and now we are going to be using this code to fetch our data. So now here you can see we have our use query. Inside our use query, we are now passing our query key, and for the query key, we are now passing a random number. Then we have a query function which will allows us to get a random number. So in the first render, we are going to be getting this random number, which is like 0.65500 and so on and so forth. But on the second render, what do you expect to get? You might be thinking like we are going to be getting some random number once again, but no, we are going to be getting that same number once again. And why is that? That's because we are now passing that random number as a query key to our use query. So which means like if we already have some sort of a data already available inside our cache, it's gonna only gives us that already available data. But if we specify some other key for our query key, then it's gonna give us another kind of random data. So if we try it there once again, like for the third time, still we are going to be getting that same response. And why is that? Because it's going to go to the cache, and it's going to ask from our cache, do you have something to share with me? And it's going to say, yeah, I already have this random data. It's going to give us that random data. But if we specify some unique key for our query key, then it's going to give us a new random data. So that was just the theory of the deduplication. And now let me show you that in action. Okay guys, so now let's see the deduplication in action. So I'm going to just create a new folder with the name of components. And inside there, we are going to be creating a component with the name of deduplication.tsx. And I'll use my RAFC inside there. Now let me go ahead and go to my app and just remove that app from there and provide my deduplication. Come on, duplication, save my file. And this is how it looks like right now. So the next thing that we have to do is that we have to import the use query from the React query. So I'll import the use query. We have to import them manually. So now let me go ahead and go to the 10 stack query and then React query, and now we have to use that right here. So I'll use like the use query. I'm going to execute, and now inside there we are going to be providing our object, and for this object we are going to be passing a query key. And now let me just pass like that same code like the random number. And now underneath there, we are going to be just providing a query function which allows us to generate a random number. So I'll give it the name of like get random number. And now let me just provide my comma there. And from here, we are going to be destructuring a few things like data. And now it's going to be equals to this use query. So now underneath there, we have to render, or let's just go back for data right here. So I'll just use like data. And I'm going to say like random number is. And now let me just paste it right here, save my file. And the final thing that we have to do is that we have to just create this function so that we can see the results. So I'll use like this function, and inside this function we are going to be only returning the promise. So I'll just use like promise.resolve, and here let's just pass our math.random. Now let me just execute this, save my file. And here you can see we're now getting this random number. But now if I go ahead and go to my app component once again, and if I just duplicate this of my file, here you can see still we are now getting that same number as compared to the first one. And why is that? That's because of the deduplication. And now let me show you the 10 stack query dev tools in action. So I'll use like 10 stack query, and I'm going to go ahead and go to there. And here you can see we have our dev tools. So I'll just choose there, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to install there. So I'm going to copy this command, and now let me open my terminal, and I'm going to make that a bit bigger. And now let's just stop there, and here we have to just use this command and hit enter. So it's going to install the 10 stack query dev tools inside our project. Now the install is done. I'm going to use npm run dev once again. Now let me go ahead and go to my main, and here we have to import this. So I'll just import that right here. I'll use like import the React query dev tools, and now let me just hit enter. So it's going to import that right here. Next we have to use so that we can see that in action. So I'll use like React query dev tools, and now let me just close that. And here for the initial is open, we are going to be setting that to false. So now let's just save our file. I'm going to open my local host right here, and here you can see we're now getting our icon. So if I click on that, it's going to give us the dev tools right here. So we can now filter stuff, we can see the sort status, we can do a lot of stuff with there, like whether something is stale or not stale or something like that. So yeah, there was a 10-step query DevTools. Let's talk about the stale time. So the stale time refers to the duration during which the cache data is considered fresh, and during this period the data is served from the cache without triggering the background refetch, which can improve the performance and reduce unnecessary network requests. I know that was a lot of gibberish which I just said, but you don't have to worry about that. So if you get it, cool. If you don't get it, you don't have to worry about it, because now I'm going to give you an example which will help you a lot. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're using some kind of a social network application. Suppose you're using either Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or X or whatever you want to call that. You are using that for 5 minutes. So in that 5 minute, you are now getting something called the stale data. You are now getting that data which is already available inside your cache. So stale simply means that you are now getting outdated data. But suppose if you want to get a new data, so for that you will need to refresh your page. So if you refresh your page, it's going to give you something called the fresh data, which simply means the new data. So stale data refer to the outdated data and fresh data refer to the new data. As simple as that. So now let me just write some code and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So now let me show you the stale time in action. So I'm going to go ahead and define another component with the name of stale time.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. Go to my app and register this component right here. So I'll comment that line out and I'll use my stale time and close it. Save this file. So now we are getting a stale time. I'm going to also open my dev tool so that we can see everything a bit better. Okay, so that's totally done. And now I'm gonna go a bit fast because I don't want to waste a lot of your time, because we already covered all of that stuff. So I'll use like data and then error. Also the is loading from where, from the use query. And now let's just import that from our 10-step query. It's gonna take the query key, and for the query key we have to specify what to do. And I'm gonna also provide the query function, and here it's gonna be set to the fetch data function. Now let's just save our file and go back. And here we have to create our fetch function. So I'll use like fetch data, and it's going to be equals to this asynchronous function, and inside there we have to get our response. So we are going to be using the fetch right like so, and we are going to be fetching our data from this URL. Now let's just store that inside the response variable, and I'm going to check if we don't have the response done. Okay, so just throw this new error, and it's going to say like network response was not okay. And I'm gonna also return the response okay. Not okay but JSON, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data. And now let me just also render that data right here, but first of all we have to check for the loading state. So if you have some sort of a loading state, in this situation we are going to be using h1. It's gonna say like loading ... And also we have to check for the error. So if we got some sort of error, then we are going to be returning this h1 once again, and error at this error dot message. Now let's just save our file, and finally we have to render our data. So I'll just use my h1 and I'll just write my data, and I'm going to also write a pre, and here we have to just use our what do we call it, JSON dot. And now I'm going to close that. Here we have to specify our data, null value and 2. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we're now getting our data. So now let's just refresh there. I'm going to also close there for a few seconds so you guys can see everything a bit better. So now let me just refresh there. And what are we getting? We are now getting our stale data. So how do I know this is a stale data? Here you can see we are now getting our to-dos, which means like this is already available inside our cache. So if I hover my mouse over to there, it's going to give us that this is a stale data, which means like this is already available inside our cache. So if I want to provide my own stale time, I can totally do that. Let's suppose I know that I have some sort of an application in which will not fetch our data that quickly, so I can totally specify my stale time right here. So I'll use like stale time, and here we can specify our milliseconds and minutes and something like that. So I'll only specify like 5000, only wait for 5 seconds, and then it gives us our stale data. So now let me just save my file. And now let's just refresh there, and here you can see it's going to give us first of all the fresh data for 5 seconds, and after 5 seconds it's going to give us a stale data, or our data will become a stale. This is how you can say that. So you know what, that's a lot of talking. So now let me just refresh there once again. So currently my data will be fresh, and after 5 seconds my data will become stale. So yeah, there was a stale time, and you can specify like 5 million or billion or something like that, but in my case I'm gonna only specify like 5,000 for 5 seconds. Let's talk about the refetch interval. So the refetch interval is an option used to automatically fetch data at specified interval. So it allows us to keep our data fresh without requiring a minimal intervention. So which simply means in some situation we would want to fetch our data after some delay or after some time. So for that kind of situations, you're going to be using the refetch interval. So you know what, let me just show you that in action, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Okay, so now let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my component with the name of refetch interval. I guess that's going to be fine.tsx. So I'll use my RAFC inside there, go to my app and register that component right here. So we have a refetch interval. So let's just import that, close this, save my file, and now we are getting our refetch interval, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. So first thing first, I'm gonna go ahead and just define a state for the current ID, then set current ID, and it's gonna be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to 1. Now we are going to be using our use query to fetch our data, not queries, but just a use query. So let's just go back. I'll use my use query and grab that from the 10 stack query and provide the query key, and here it's going to be set to the to-dos or to do rather, and here we are going to be also passing the current ID for the unique ID. Okay, so let's just provide our comma and provide a query function which will allows us to fetch our data. So I'll use like fetch to do, and here we have to pass our current ID inside there. Okay, so I'm going to also destructure a few things. So I'll just destructure first of all the data, then the error, and finally the loading. So is loading, god damn it, is loading, like so it's going to be coming from the use query. Now let me just define this function right here. So I'll just place this coding. We are not doing anything crazy, but it is now taking ID, and now we are passing that ID to that specific to do, and based on that ID we are now getting that specific to do. Okay, so that's totally done. So I'm going to also hide there. And now let's just use the inside of our UI, but first of all we're going to be using the use effect for the side effect. So I'll use like use effect, and here what I'm going to do is that let's just provide our function, and here it's going to take the dependency array of empty dependency array. Now we have to get the set interval and pass our arrow function inside there, and it's going to say like set current ID, and we have to provide our previous ID. That's going to be set to previous ID is less than 200. Now we are assuming that the data which we are now fetching is equal to 200 items. But if that's not the case, so in that situation we are going to be using our previous ID plus 1. But if that's also not the case, so we are going to be only returning 1. Okay, and here we also have to specify 5 seconds for the interval. So I'm going to store the inside a variable, so I'll use like interval is going to be equals to the set interval, and finally we have to just clean this up. So I'll use like return, and now inside there we have to use our clear interval and pass our interval inside there. So it's going to just clean up our interval, or you can say that it's going to unmount our interval. So let's just hide there. Now we have to check for the loading and also for the errors, right? So if we have the loading, so in that situation we are going to be returning our h1. So let's just use our h1, and it's going to say like loading 1, loading dot dot dot. And also we have to check for the error if we got one. So in that situation we are going to be returning h1, and error we have to render our error right here. Okay, so that's also done. Now we have to go to our UI, and inside this UI, so I'll just write h1 of to do, and here we have to use our not prevert p, there we go, and render our to do's inside this. So I'll use like json.stringify and pass our data, null value, and also second, and then we have to create a button, and this button will say gives us a next to do, and also when somebody clicks on there we are going to be firing this function which will just change the set current ID. Inside there we are going to be passing our previous ID. Come on, previous ID, and what do we have to do? We have to just use our previous ID is less than 200. In that situation we are going to be using our previous ID plus 1, but if that's not the case we are going to be only using 1. Okay, so that's totally done. Now here you can see we are now getting their data. If I click on this button, so it's going to give us another data, but in some situation we would want to fetch our data in some specified interval. So for that situation, we are going to be using another option or another property which is called the refetch interval. So I'll use like refetch interval, and here we can specify the duration. So I'll just use like 5 seconds. So now if I save my file, and now I'm going to just refresh there and wait for 5 seconds. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and bang, it's gonna give us a new data. Now I can wait for 5 more seconds and it's gonna give us more data, and so on and so forth. I am not clicking on that button. It is now refetching that data again and again by itself, and that's because of this refetch interval property. In some situation, we would want to fetch our data from multiple endpoints at once, like for example from the to-dos, from the comments, from the post, and so much more. So how can you go about doing that? By using the 10-stack query. And 10-stack query already have a hook for that, which is called the use queries. So the use queries is a hook that allows us to execute multiple queries in parallel and manage their result in a unified way. This is useful when you need to fetch data from multiple sources or endpoints in a single component, but want to handle each query set separately. For example, loading error data while keeping the queries independent. So this is just a use queries, and now let me show you how the syntax will look like. So first of all, we would need to call our use queries hook, and it's gonna also take an object as a parameter, and inside that object we are going to be passing something called the queries array. Okay, so inside that array we have to specify the query key. For each endpoint we are going to be passing an object, and inside each endpoint we are going to be passing the query key and some unique key for that query, and also a unique function which will allows us to fetch that specific item from that specific source. Okay, so we can now fetch our data from the to-dos, from the post, from the comments, and so much more. So that was just a theory about the use queries, and now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Let's suppose if I want to fetch my data from both of these endpoints, like for example from the post and also from the to-dos. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? By using the 10-stack query, and then it's totally simple and easy. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create another component with the name of fetch from multiple endpoints.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. Now let me go ahead and register there right here. So I'll just return my fetch from multiple endpoints, and now let me just close this file, save my now let me just close this, save my file, close this out, and here you can see we are now getting our label, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. So what I want to do is that I want to define two states. So I'll use like first of all the current to do ID, and then set current to do ID, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to 1. Okay, we are going to be also creating another state for the current post ID. So I'll use like post ID and then set current post ID, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be also set to 1. Now we are going to be fetching our data from multiple endpoints by using the use queries hook. So I'll use like use queries, and now if I hit enter, so it's going to import the from the 10-stack query React.js, or React query to be precise. Okay, so now I'm gonna execute there, and inside there it's gonna take an object, and inside that object we're going to be specifying the queries, or maybe this is totally optional, but we can totally provide the options for there. So in this situation we're not going to be providing any options to there, but I will just provide my object, and inside this object now we are going to be passing our queries. So I'll use like queries, and now here there's going to be an array, and inside this array we can specify our endpoints from where we want to fetch our data. So first of all, I want to fetch my data from the post, then I want to fetch my data from the to-dos. So I'll just provide my query key, and the query key will be in this situation a to-dos, and also I'm going to specify my function which we did not create not yet, but we will create that in a few seconds. So I'll use like fetch to-dos, and that's done. Okay, now we are going to be also fetching our data from the query key. Let's just provide there. We are going to be also fetching our data from the post, and we are going to be also providing our query function to there. So I'll just give it the name of like fetch post, and now let me just save my file. Now that we specify our queries, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create this function. So our fetch to do's and also our fetch post. I'm gonna also store that in some sort of a variable, so I'll just give it the name of like I don't know, maybe a results would be fine. It's gonna be equals to this use queries. Okay, now let me go ahead and just create this function right here, which one allows us to fetch our data. So I'll use like fetch to do's, and here there's going to be an asynchronous function, so I'll just mark that as an async function. And here this is fetch our data. I'm going to store the inside the response, so I'll use like await and then fetch my data by using just a fetch, so I'll use like fetch. You can also use the XUse if you wanted to, and now we are going to be fetching our data from this endpoint. Okay, and now let's just check if we don't have response.ok, so in that situation we are going to be throwing a new error, and I'll just say like network response was not okay. But if that's not the case, we are going to be only returning the response.json. And now let me just execute this, save my file, and it's gonna allow us to fetch our data from this endpoint right here. Let me just highlight that. It's gonna allow us to fetch our data from only the to-dos. Now if you want to fetch our data from the fetch post as well, so well we have to just create this same function. Now let me just duplicate that. I'm going to change the name of this function to fetch post, and now we are going to be also changing that from the to-dos to post, and that's going to be it. That's all the thing that we have to do right now. Now you can log that data to the console, so I'll just write like console.log of results, and I'm going to also provide a bit of separator so we can see that, and I'll just save my file right. So we prevented your connection to JSON placeholder.type by code because it was dangerous. Type malicious, this malicious software that would harm your data, computer, or network. God damn it. You know what? Let me just test this out because I'm not building in the production, but you saw that. Okay, like this API is not secure. So it will install some malicious data in your computer, and it will try to hack your computer, or maybe I don't know, but from my antivirus software. But you know what, now let me just refresh there, and here you can see we're now getting two datas. So the one will be from the to-dos, and if I expand there, so here you can see we are now getting different to-dos, and also one will be from that post. So now let me just expand there, and we can check this data out, and these are all the posts. Okay, so now I can totally render my data inside my UI. So this is how we are going to be fetching data from multiple endpoints, and now we have to render them inside our UI. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just destructure the to-dos query and also the post query from the results. So I'll just destructure there from the to-dos query and also from the post query. It's going to be coming from this result. So now that we successfully fetched there, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to just check for the loading state. You don't have to do that if you don't want to do that, but I want to do that. So I'll write my to-dos query dot is loading, and then loading or post query dot is loading. If one of these states are loading, so in that situation we are going to be just returning some sort of a loader. So I'll just write like loading dot dot dot, and we also don't have to provide these curly braces because we can also do that in one liner. So that's totally done. We can also check for the errors if we got some. So I'll just use like to-dos query dot error or post query dot error. Okay, so in that situation we are going to be only returning a div, and this div will say like an error occurred or something like that, and then we are going to be just rendering our error. So to-dos query dot error, if we have the error, then we want to show only the message of that error. But if that's not the case, we are going to be also checking for the post query dot error if we got the error from there. So in that situation we are going to be getting our message. That's also done. Now finally we have to just extract their data from our post query and also from our to-dos query. So first of all, let me just get that data. So I'll just use like to-dos query, and then we are going to be storing the inside the to-dos. Come on, to-dos data, and it's going to be equals to that data. Now let me just duplicate that and change that to post query. So I'll use like post query, and here we also have to change that to post data. Now let me just save this file, and finally we have to render that inside our UI. Yes, I'll just write my h1 of to-dos or something like that. I'll also write my pre, okay, because here we're now rendering our data as a JSON format. So I'll just use like json.stringify, and here I can just say like to-dos data. Come on, it should be 1t, not twice. So I'm gonna have to remove 1t from there. So to-dos data dot find, here we have to specify the to-do, and then to do can be basically anything. So I'll just write like to do and any. You can specify the type there, but I don't have a lot of time. So I'll use like to do dot id. If that's triple equals to that current id which we are creating right here, which is now initially set to 1. So if that is the case, so in that situation, what do we have to do? We have to return that data. I'm gonna also specify the null and also the second parameter for my stringify. That's also done. And finally, we also have to create a button which will allows us to get new data. So I'll use like button, and I'll say like next to do. And here we are going to be also attaching a function, but you know what, we're going to be doing that in a few seconds. And here you can see we are now getting our to-dos, and this is our first to-do. And I'll also provide a bit of styling to this. So I don't know, maybe background will be set to totally teal 300, and the text will be set to totally white maybe. And yeah, we are getting our button, but it should be maybe, I don't know, maybe 700 would be fine. Okay, 700, and now that's looking, yeah, not better, but it is looking. So yeah, I guess that 2 would be fine, and this is looking better. Now we have to attach a function for this button. So when somebody clicks on there, then we want to fire this function, which is a handle next to do click. And now let me copy the name of that, go to the top and create that function right here. Okay, so I'll just define my function. We are not going to be doing anything crazy, but we are going to be just getting new data. So I'll just write like set current to do's. Come on, set. Why am I not getting? Oh, that's because I'm creating the outside. My bad. So we have to define this function right here, and I'll use like set current, and I'll use like set current to do's, not post, but to do id. And here we have to specify our previous id. And then we are going to be using like met.minimum and provide our previous id plus 1, and also the to-do's data dot length. Okay, so what the hell is going on? So I'll use like length, and now let me just save my file. And here you can see the user id is 1 and the id is also 1, and this is the title. But now if I click on there, and it's gonna give us a new data, but I don't know why it is not giving us there. Let me just go ahead and go to my console, and we are now getting some sort of an error. If I click on there, it should be getting us a new data. Why it's not working? So let's just go back a bit. I'm going to clear this out, and now I want to click on there, and it's not working. And I know why it's not working, because I spent a lot of time figuring out what the hell did I did wrong. And here you can see we are now passing a current post id, and it shouldn't be a post id, it should be a current to do id. Now let me just paste my current to do id, save my file, and now let me just refresh there, and I want you to watch what happens. So if I click on there, it's going to give us the second id, and also it's going to change the title. Let me just click on there once again, and it's going to give us new data anytime I click on there. That's totally done. But I also want to render my data from the post. So it's going to be quite simple and easy. So we just have to create h1 once again, and I will also provide a bit of brs and also hrs right here, and I'll just say like this is a post. So I'll use like posts, and now underneath there we are going to be using our pre once again. And now let's just use our json.stringify, and here we have to specify our post. Come on, here we have to specify or post.id, post data.find, and now here is going to take a post, and there's going to be any, and now we are going to be checking if post.id is triple equals to the current post id. So in this situation we are going to be getting our data. I'm going to also specify a null and also second for the JSON stringify, and it should be inside there. There we go. So that's totally done. And now underneath there we are going to be also creating our button. So I'll just create that button which will say like next post, and now let me just save there. And we are not getting anything, we are only getting our post 2. I don't know why, but that from here, and we have to paste there right in here. There we go. And now let me just close there, save my file right now, and we are now getting all of our data. So now we are getting our to-dos, and also we are getting our post. But now if I click on there, nothing will happen because we have to attach our event handler. And also I'm going to just copy all of these styling from there. Let me just paste this styling right here. And also when somebody clicks on there, we want to fire this function which is a handle next post. Come on, post click. Okay, so now let me just copy a name of there and go to the top and create that function right here. So we are not going to be doing anything crazy, but I'll just create this function right here, and inside this function we are going to be using set current post id in that situation. And now we have to provide our previous id, and if met.minimum previous id plus 1, and also we have to render our post data dot length. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and if I click on this, so it's going to give us a new post right here. And also if I click on this data, so it's going to give us a new to do. So this is how we are going to be fetching our data from multiple sources or multiple endpoints at once by using the use queries hook. Now let's talk about the use mutation hook. So the use mutation hook is used to handle mutative operations. So what are mutative operations? Mutative operations are creating, updating, or deleting data on either the backend or the remote server. So unlike the use query, which we just saw a few seconds ago, which is used for fetching or caching the data, now we are going to be learning about the use mutation, so which is specially designed for actions that changes the data, like either create, update, or delete that specific data. So how the syntax will look like? First of all, we are going to be using the use mutation hook, and we are going to be passing a function which will allows us to mutate or change that specific data. Then we are going to be passing an options object, and inside there we can pass like on mutate, and this function will be called before the mutation function is fired. And also we are going to be passing the on error, which allows us to handle the error cases. Then we have the on success, which allows us to handle the success cases. And also we have the on settled, which will be called once the mutation either succeed or fails. So that's just a basic theory of what a use mutation is. But now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now let's see the use mutation in action. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define another component with the name of mutating data.tsx would be fine. I'll use my RFC inside there and register there right in here. So I'll use like mutating data. Now let me just render that to the DOM. And here you can see we are now getting our data, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. So inside there, we're going to be first of all getting our query client. So I'll use like use query client. Let's just get there, and I'm gonna store them inside the query client function, or not a function, but inside the query client variable. And I'm gonna also define my state. So I'll give it the name of like title and then set title, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to empty string. That's like that. Now let me go ahead and go to my UI, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create my h1, which will be a create new to do would be fine. And now underneath there we are going to be creating our form. So this form will not take any action, but it will take the on submit. So when somebody submit this form, we're going to be firing this function, which is a handle submit. And you know what, we're going to be doing that a bit later, because now it's going to give us a lot of errors. So now inside there we are going to be creating our input field with the type of text. I'm going to also specify the value, and we are going to be getting the title. And now let's just paste that value inside there. Okay, so we are going to be also passing the on change. So then we are going to be using that set title, and here we have to pass our event.target.value inside there. And also for the placeholder, we are going to be passing like add or enter, and that's totally done. Now underneath there we are going to be creating our button, which allows us to add. I'm gonna also pass the type, and the type will be set to totally submit. Come on, what the hell? Submit like that. And now if I save my file, that's totally done. And here you can see we are now getting our input field and also our buttons. So you know what, let me just provide a bit of styling today. So for the classes, I'll just provide like border. It's gonna be add. Yeah, I guess that's looking cool. And for the styling, we're going to be only attaching like background totally black off. Yeah, I guess that would be fine. And text will be set to totally white. And yeah, that's totally cool. We don't have to care about the styling for now. And now when somebody try to submit this form, so I'll use like on submit, then we are going to be firing this function, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. Now let me go ahead and go to the top, and here we are going to be creating that function like handle submit. It's going to take that event, and it's going to be coming from the react.js.form event. Come on, like that. And that's totally done. We also have to provide the HTML form element as our generic, and now inside there we have to use our event.prevent default, and that's going to be done. We're going to be also checking if the title.trim value, like if we don't have any spaces, or if we do have any spaces, then we are going to be only returning that. That's totally done. And now here we have to somehow mutate our data, or send our data like so. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? Let's just see how we can do that. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to define my own interface for the to do. So I'll use like interface to do, and here inside there let's just provide our ID, and that's going to be optional. and we have to provide a number, then we have to provide the title, and the title will be string. We also have to provide the completed, and there's going to be a boolean. Now let me just save there, and now we are going to be using that to do again and again for the TypeScript. So now here we have to use our use mutation, which will be coming from the 10-state query. So it did not import there. Okay, it did. So now we are going to be using that right here. So it expects 2 arguments. So if I hover my mouse over to there, so it takes the mutation function, and also it takes the options. So let me just paste that right here. So now let me provide my object, and inside this object we are going to be passing the mutation function, which will allows us to change our data. So we are going to be creating this function in a few seconds, but I'm going to just paste it right here like post the to do, because we want to post their to do. And next we have to provide our options. So when we successfully add our to do, so in that situation, what do we have to do? I'll just use something called the query client.invalidate queries. So what in the world is that invalidate queries, and why should you want to care about that? So when a new to do is added, calling the invalidate query, and we also have to paste the to-dos inside there, ensures that the next time you access that to-do, they will be fetched from the server, including the newly added to-do as well. It is just used for the better experience, and you don't even have to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just pass my to-do right here, which we just created a few seconds ago. So we are now passing there right here, and now we have to store that in some sort of a variable. So I'll just give it the name of like a result, and that's going to be done. Now we have to create this post to do, which will allows us to post our data. So I'm going to go to the top, and now let's just create our post to do. So I'll use like post to do, and it's going to take an asynchronous function, and now we have to provide our new to do today, and there's going to be that to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write my await fetch, and now we are going to be changing our data from this URL from / to do's. Okay, and also we have to provide our options. So we are going to be adding that options in a few seconds, but first of all we have to store them inside the response variable. Like so response is going to be equals to that await and that fetching data, and now we have to provide our response. And by the way, you are not only limited to use the fetch, you can use xuse, you can use whichever kind of solution that you prefer, but I'm using the fetch because I know a lot of you know JavaScript, but a lot of you don't know what xuse and all of that new stuff is. So that's the only reason I'm using fetch. But if you know something else like some other library, you can definitely use that inside your fetching data or mutating data. So I'll just give it the option of method, and here we have to pass our post as a method, and also we have to provide our headers, and for these headers we are going to be setting that to content type. Come on, content, that's going to be set to application/json. And now for the body, we are going to be adding that newly created body. So I'll just use like json.stringify and then that new to do. Okay, so it should be to do like so. There we go. And now what do we have to do? We have to check for the response. So if we don't have the response.ok, so in that situation, what do we have to do? We have to throw a new error. So I'll use like throw new error, and it's going to say like network response was not okay. But if that's not the case, we are going to be only returning response not okay, and I mean like not okay, but JSON. There we go. God damn it, JSON, there we go. And now we have to execute that, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data. First of all, we have to tell like where we want to fetch our data, then we have to provide which HTTP method we want to use, then we also have to provide our headers, and finally we have to add a new data, which will allows us to add a new data. So now let me just close there, and even I'm gonna also close there. So it's gonna give us that result, and now we are getting a lot of stuff. Now it is giving us an error. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add my error or to do. There we go. So now it's going to just remove that error, and now let me console log that result to the console. So I'll use like result. Now let me just close this, save my file, go into the inspect element, go to the console, and now let me just refresh there. Now it's going to give us that object. So inside this object we have the context. Let me just make it a bit bigger so you guys can see everything a bit better. So inside there we have our context, data, error, and we have a lot of things, but the only thing we are now interested in is only the data, also the error, and also that muted function. By using this muted function, it's gonna allows us to change our data. So we would need that error, we would also need this muted function, and we would need the status. So if we can find that, okay, there we go. So we would also need that status as well. So now let's just use that. I'm going to close there. Now let me just remove there, and here we are now going to be destructuring the mutate function, which will allow us to mutate or change our data. We also have to access or destructure the error and also the status from there. Okay, so now let's just use the inside our UI, but first of all we have to mutate our data, so I'll just remove that from here. And now we are going to be using that mutate function, and now we are going to be passing a title, the completed flag. Come on, the completed will be now set to totally false. And now underneath there we have to use our set title and make that as a totally empty string. Now I'm gonna go to the bottom, and here we have to do a lot of things, so let's just remove there. Here first of all we have to provide our status. So if your status is equal to pending, so in this situation, we're going to be providing the label of adding dot dot dot. If that's not the case, so I'll just provide like add to do. Now let me just save my file, and now underneath there, we also have to take care of the errors. So if you have some sort of an error, in that situation, we're going to be just writing our h1, and I will say like an error occurred or something like that. And now let's just render our error dot message right here. And now underneath there, we also have to check for the status once again. So if our status is set to success, in that situation we are going to be just providing a label. I'll say like, come on, successfully. There we go. And now let me just save my file, and now we are going to be adding a new to do. So I'm going to go to the inspect element, then I'm going to go to the network tab, and now we are going to be adding a new to do. So I'll just write like new to do, and now if I click on the add to do, and it's gonna give us the 201 and also the 204, so which means like our new to do is successfully added right here. I'm now providing a new to do, and here you can see it is now set to post. We are now posting that data to their to-dos, and it is now successfully created. We can also see the preview, and everything is working the way we expect them to work. We can also click on these dev tools, and here we are going to be going into this mutation. Now I'll just add something else like something else. Okay, so if I click on there, and here you can see it's going to add there right here. So if I click on there, you can see more details right here. So variables are title something else, and completed is now set to false. The context is set to null, and we have all of that data which you can see by yourself. So that was amazing, and this is how we are going to be adding a new to do by using the use mutate hook. Okay, so welcome to the last topic of this course, which is called the pagination. So let's just create the pagination penguin.tsx, and I'll use my RAFCE inside there. Save this file, go to the app and register there right here. So I'll use like pagination, and I'm gonna close that, save this file, and here you can see we're now getting our pagination, which means like everything is working the way we expect them to work. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my current page. So I'll use like current page, and then set current page, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to now, I mean like 1, and then we are going to be also creating a page size. So I'll use like page size, and it's going to be set to 10 pages. 10 data per page would be fine. That's already done. Now we have to fetch our data by using the use query. So I'll use like use query, not queries, but just a, god damn it, let's just remove there, and get our data by using the use query, singular, not plural. I can't even speak that word. And we have to specify the query key, and the query key will be set to to-dos and also the current page. And we are going to be also providing our query function, and this query function will allows us to fetch our data. So I'll use like fetch to-dos, and here we have to pass our current page and also the page size like so. And now we have to store them in some sort of a variable, or you know what, we are going to be destructuring our data right away. We don't want to store them in the variables because we already know what we are going to be getting. So we are going to be getting the data, also the error, and also the is loading from the use query. Now let me just create that function. So I'll use like const fetch to do's, and here is gonna be an asynchronous function. So it's gonna take a page, and the default value will be set to 1, and it's gonna also take the limit, and the default value will be set to only 10. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and now let's just fetch our data. So I'll use like await and fetch, and here inside there we are going to be doing a bit of magic. Now that we already know that where we are going to be fetching our data, which means like we are going to be fetching our data from this URL. So we are going to be fetching our data from the JSON placeholder.typeicode.com/to-dos, and question mark, we are going to be getting our data from the page, and page will be now set to this dynamic page, which we are now taking as a perimeter, and now we are passing a value for them, which is now set to only 1. Okay, so we are going to be passing the data totally dynamically. So I'll use like page and it's gonna also take the limit, and the limit will also be totally dynamic. So I'll use like limit, and this is how we are going to be fetching our data. This is going to be the URL by which we are going to be fetching our data, and it takes a page, like from which page you want to fetch your data. So we want to fetch our data from this first page. It is now taking this page as a perimeter, and we are now providing the default value of 1 to there, but we are going to be also changing this page whenever we click on the next button. So for there we already defined our state, and we provided the initial value of 1 to there, and now we are passing that current page as a first perimeter to this fetch to do's, and it is now taking there right here, and we are also providing the 1 as a default value to there. Next we have the limit, like how much data you want to get from this use fetch. So we initially specify the initial value of 10 to there, but we are going to be also changing, I mean like we are not going to be changing there, but the initial value we now specify 10 to there. Okay, and now we are just rendering the 10 item right here. So now let me just remove these empty spaces from here because they are annoying and we have to store them in some sort of variable. So like response would be fine, and now let me just save them. And now we have to check. So if we don't have the response done okay, so in that situation we are going to be throwing a new error. So throw the throw new error. It's gonna say like network response was not okay. There we go. And return response.json and execute that. Now let me just save my file, and then it's totally done. Now we have to take care of the loading and also the error state. So if we have the is loading, so in that situation we are going to be returning our h1, and it will say like loading dot dot dot. And if we have the error, so in that situation we are going to be returning our h1, and I will say like an, or you know what, just error would be fine. And I will just render my error dot message right here, save this file. Now let me go ahead and go to my UI and provide my UI right here. So for this h1 I'll select to do's, and for the prev I'll just render my data right here. So I'll use like json.stringify and provide my data null value and 2. Now underneath there we are going to be also creating our previous button and also our next button. So I'll just create my div, and inside this div we are going to be creating our button which will say like previous or previous page, and we're going to be also creating yet another button which will say like next page. So that's totally done. So when somebody clicks on this button, so we have to get the previous data. So we are going to be using like handle previous page, and also we have to disable that if our current page is equal to 1. So we are going to be disabling that button. And also when somebody clicks on this next page button, so in that situation we are going to be firing this function which is a handle next page. And now let's just create both of these functions right here. I'll start by defining this function which is a handle previous page, and I'll use like const handle previous page, and inside there we have to use our set current page, and here we have to pass our previous page like so. Now we are going to be using met.maximum or max. Here we have to provide our previous page, just remove 1 from there, and for the second perimeter we are going to be passing 1 to there. That's totally done. Now we have to create our handle next page, and we have to define there right here. So I'll use like const handle next page, and inside there we are going to be using our set current page, and it's going to take the previous page, and we have to just add 1 to their previous page. So it's going to give us like basically the next item, and it's going to give us the previous item. Now we are getting all of their to-dos, and we have 10 items right here. And you know, let's just style these buttons so that we can see them a bit better. And I'll provide like, I don't know, background totally tail of 300. I guess that's going to be fine. And I'm going to also provide margin for the bottom of 10 maybe. Yeah, that's totally looking cool. And padding all around will be set to 3. Yep, that's looking cool. I'm going to basically copy all of that styling and put that right here, remove that margin for the bottom, and change the color to crimson. 300, oh, not a crimson, but I don't know, maybe cyan. God, we have a lot of colors in Tailwind CSS, and I can't even choose one from them. Oh my god. You know, let's just search for a color. I guess purple would be fine. And yeah, we are now getting our purple button, which is looking cool. If I click on there, so it's load our data. Now it's going to give us 11, 12 till 20. And now if I click on this previous page, so it's going to give us that 10. and it's gonna start from the 1 and then it's gonna go through 10. If I click on there once again, it's gonna give us 20 more item. If I click on there once again, so it's gonna give us a loader. It's gonna start from 21. It will go to 30 item and so on and so forth. You get the idea. So this is how we are going to be performing a pagination in 10-stack query. Let's talk about testing. So what is testing and why should you even care about that? So testing is the process of checking a program or application to make sure it works correctly. It's like double checking your work to ensure everything functions as expected. So there are a lot of types of testing, but in this course we are going to be covering something called the automated testing. So there are 3 flavors or types of automated testing. So we have a unit test, we have an integration test, and we have an end-to-end test. So let's just break them down one by one. The first one we have is a unit testing, and this course is totally focused on unit testing. So what is a unit testing and why should you want to care about that? So unit testing is where developer test individual component of an application like functions or classes to ensure they work as expected, and these tests focus on small isolated part of your code. Okay, so that was about the unit testing, and in this course we are going to be covering a unit testing. So next one we have is a integration testing. So integration testing or integration testing is about checking how different part of your application works together. While unit tests focus on individual component, which we just saw a few seconds ago, integration testing ensure that module, database, APIs, and other services interact correctly. So that's just the integration testing, and we're not going to be covering that in this course. And finally we have a end-to-end testing. So end-to-end testing simulates real user scenarios to make sure the entire application works as expected from start to finish, and it tests the whole system including the front end and also the back end if you are aware of those topics and any external services, which we're not going to be covering, like any services and that kind of stuff, to ensure everything integrates and functions properly in a real world environment. So that was the E2E or end-to-end testing. So here you can see I have this application right here which is not looking that cool, I know that, but this is just an example. So if you want to break this down by using an end-to-end testing, so this is how we are going to be breaking this down. Here you can see we are now testing individual component or just a specific part of this application. So this is how we are going to be testing there by using the unit test. And what if you want to test that as integration test? So if you want to do that, so this is how we are going to be testing the combination of these components, and we can see how these components combined together works. And finally we have an end-to-end testing, the backend and the front end and also the services and all of that kind of stuff, and we are going to be testing the entire application. So that was just a quick theory about what is a testing, and now let's talk about the frameworks and their pros and cons. Let's talk about the testing framework. So there are a lot of testing frameworks that you can choose from. So we have Jest, we have Vitess, Cypress, Playwright, Mocha, Chai. There are a lot of them, but in this course we're going to be only using and we're going to be only focusing on the Vitess. And why is that? That's because Vitess is the fastest. It supports ECMAScript, it supports TypeScript, and it also supports JSX. On the other hand, those other frameworks are also fast, but not as compared to the Vitess, and also they support ESM but as experimental. Okay, and I'm not sure whether they support TypeScript and JSX or not, but Vitess does, and this is the future, so that's why we are going to be focusing on the Vitess. So now let's make a set of 4 testing coding journeys. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal, if I can open that today. Oh, there we go. I'm going to use npm create vite at latest, and let's just hit enter. I'm going to give it the name of like React, or not React, but unit testing demos. Okay, demos, there we go. I'm going to choose vanilla, and then I'm going to choose JavaScript, not TypeScript, but JavaScript. And now I know a lot of you will ask me, Hossein, what the hell? Why aren't you using a TypeScript? Well, that's because I'm using a JavaScript because we are now learning about the unit testing and it involves a lot of edge cases. So I want to show you that as well. And once we jump into the React.js part, then we are going to be using the TSX, which means like React.js with TypeScript. So don't worry about that. And if you want to choose TypeScript, you can totally do that, but I'm not going to. And trust me, you're gonna love it. So let's just choose JavaScript, and I'm gonna use npm i. Okay, first of all, we have to go into that unit testing demos, and now let's just use our npm i to install there. And now I'm going to open there by using my VS Code command, which is a code dot. So it's going to open there right here. So this is how it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my public and remove there. Then I'm going to go to the src and totally delete there. And now let me recreate my src folder. So I'm going to just click on that icon and give it the name of src. And now we have to install the vtest. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal and I'm going to just type like npm I and then -d for the dev dependencies, and I'm going to give it the name of like vtest. And let's just hit enter. So it's going to install there inside our package.json or inside our current repository. So I'll just use like package.json right here. And here you can see we have our vt and we have our vtest with the version of 2.1.8. And I'm pretty sure if you are watching this video in the future, so this version will be definitely changed. Okay, so let's just close there. And also I'm gonna go into my package.json once again. I don't know why I just closed there. And now let's just create our script. So I'll use like test, and then we have to just write a vtest. So now if I save my file, and that's it. That's it for the setup. And now let's just close there. Okay, so now let's write a basic code which we are going to be using inside our testing. So I'll just first of all create a file with the name of like mathutils utils.js. And now inside there we are going to be doing craziness. So first of all I want to create my add function, and it's going to take the a and b as a parameter, and we just want to plus both of them. So that's going to be my add function. Now let's just create our subtract function. Subtract, it's going to also take the a and b as a parameter, and let's just subtract a from b. And we also have to create a multiply, and it's going to also take a and b, and let's just use a times b. I'm going to use a times b, and it's going to multiply there. And finally we have to create yet another function for the divide. It's going to also take a and b as a parameters. And now let's just use like if our b value is equal to 0, so we want to throw some error. So I'll use like throw new error, and I'm going to say like division by 0 is not allowed. There we go. Let's just go back, save my file. And also finally we have to just return our a divide by b. Now we have to export all of that functions so we can use them in other files. So I'll use like export, and also export here, and also export here, and finally for the division function as well. So now let me just use there so that we can use this function inside other files. So that's totally done. Now let me just close there. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my root directory, and inside there we are going to be defining yet another folder which will be for our test. So you can either give it the name of like test, and here you can see it's going to change the folder icon. And I've personally seen a lot of other developers who uses this convention, which is a double underscore, which means like dunder, and this is a Python thing, so you don't have to worry about that. And then they just write like test and then double underscore once again. So still we are now getting that same icon right here. If you prefer this syntax, definitely go for that, but in my case I'm not going to. So I'll just give it the name of like test and hit enter. And now inside there we are going to be creating our file. So whenever we are creating our test file, first of all we have to ask ourselves, is that what in the world are we even testing? So we are now testing our math utilities folder, I mean like math utilities file. So in that situation we are going to be creating our file with that same name. You don't have to, but I wanted to. So I'll use like mathutils.test.js. Okay, so whenever you use the .test, so you are now telling your compiler that this file will be a test file. And here you can see we are now getting the test icon. So now if I hit enter right here, and this is how our test file will look like. Before I get into more detail, first of all I want you to keep in mind that don't worry about this code which I am about to write. You don't have to worry about the code which I'm about to write, because I'm going to explain every single thing about that code in a lot of great detail, but you don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to just write this code. If you want to follow along, you can definitely do that. But my recommendation will be to do not sweat about this code, because we are going to be covering all of them in a lot of great detail. So I'll just import first of all something called the describe. We're going to be also exporting, I mean like importing the it and also the expect function. So let's just use our expect, and that's it. And we also have to import our function. So I'll just import something from, let's just go ahead and go to our src folder and then our math utilities folder. And we're going to be importing the add function, the subtract function, the multiply function, and our divide functions. Okay, so now underneath there, I'm gonna just write a bit of code, so which will be for a describe, and I'll give it the name of like math utilities. And it's going to also take a callback function, and I'm gonna use my it syntax, and it should sum two numbers. And now we want to provide our expectation, and here we have to call our function, which is like 2 and 3 as a parameter, and we want this to be 5. Okay, so whenever we do this, save our file, and now I'm gonna open my terminal, and I'm gonna only write npm either t or test. You can either give it the name of like t, or you can also just write a test, but in my case I'm gonna only write t. And if I hit enter right here, so it's gonna give us all of their description. So we are now testing this file, and our describe function name is a math utilities, and we are just providing this one test, which is like it should sum two numbers, and both of the tests are now successfully passing. Okay, so I'm going to just close there, and now let's learn about all of that stuff in a lot of great detail. We just import a few things from the vtest, which is the describe, it, and also the expect. So we are going to be learning about all of them in a few seconds, but first of all, let's just start from the first one, which is called the describe. So what is the describe, and why should anyone care about that? So the describe function is used to group related test cases together, and it helps organize tests into a logical block, making the test output more readable and structured. And this is totally optional. Like if you want to provide that, you totally can, but you don't have to. Okay, so when we want to group related multiple tests, when we are working with multiple tests, which we should be, so in that situation we are going to be using the describe. Okay, so describe only take the description and also the callback function. Whenever we are grouping related test cases, so in that situation we are going to be using the describe. So now let's talk about that it or test. So you can either use the it or you can use the test. So it describe a specific test case. So both the test and it are used to define individual test cases, and they work the same way and can be used either one to write a test case. So whenever you are defining your test, so in that situation we can either use the it or we can use the test, something which I'm going to show you in a few seconds. But first of all, let's just talk about the syntax. So we are going to be either using the it or we can use the test. Both of them will work exactly the same, and it also take a description and a callback function. So keep in mind, whenever you are providing their description, you have to provide some sort of a meaningful description for your test cases, because later it's going to help you a lot. It's not going to only help you, but it's going to also help other engineers when they are working with either your component library or in your project or something like that. So that was it about the describe and it. And now let's talk about the final piece, which is called the expect. Expect is also a function used to make assertion in our test cases, and an assertion is a statement that checks if the value meets a certain condition, like the equality, truthiness, falsiness, etc. We use expect to check if the result of one test is what we expect it to be. So this is how the syntax will look like. First of all, we are going to be using the expect, then we are going to be providing some sort of a value to there, and then we have different assertions. So like we have to be and so on and so forth, which we are going to be covering in a lot of great detail in this course. So to sum it up, this is how exactly our code looks like. First of all, we are now importing the describe, it, and expect. Then we are also importing our function which we want to test. Now that we know we are going to be testing a lot of things, so if you want to group this, so for that we are going to be using the describe function, and then we can provide some sort of a description. In my case, I provided like math utilities, or you can give it any name that you prefer. And now inside the describe, we are now providing our it function. You can either use the it or you can use the test, and then you have to specify some sort of a meaningful description for your test. And then inside there we are going to be providing our expectation, and now inside our expect we are now calling our function, and we already know that add function take two parameter, so which means like we are going to be providing either 2 and 3, any value that you prefer, and then we can specify the output result, like what will be the output of that function execution. Okay, so we are now providing like 2 and 3, and now we are expecting that to be 5, and we are also providing -1 and 1, and we are expecting it to be 0. So yeah, that was just the basics of describe, it, and expect. And now let's get into the coding, and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now I am totally confident because I know that you guys already know this code, so I can definitely remove this comment from here, save my file, and let's get into our testing. So I'm going to also just use expect one more time, and I'm going to pass my -1 and 1, and it should be, let's just write to be 0. Okay, so let's just save our file and run our test one more time. So I'm going to use like npm test and hit enter, so it's going to run my test, and both of the tests are now successfully passing. So if I, let's suppose, change that to maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 like so, and now if I save my file, what are we getting? We are now getting an error. it is expecting 5 and it count 102. Okay, so this is not allowed. Combine like both of them like 102, so it's gonna give us like 102, and we are now expecting that to be 5, so this is not fair. It's gonna give us an error. So now let's just get it back. Now let's just test our subtract function, multiply function, and divide function. So now underneath this 8, and by the way, I also mentioned there, but I want to show you there, we can either use the 8 or we can also use the test. So if I copy the name of the test, and now we have to place that right here. So if I save my file and check this out, still all of our tests are now successfully passing, and every single thing is working the way we expect it to work. So you can either use test or you can use the 8. So I'll just remove their test and I'm going to just replace that with 8 because I love it. So if you want to use the test, you are more than welcome to do that. Now let's test our subtract function. So I'm going to use that 8 one more time, and it should subtract one number from another, or from the other would be fine, or another. You can give it like basically any description that you prefer. So I'll just provide my expectation, and here we have to call our function, and I'm going to provide like 5 and 3, and we are expecting the value to be only 2. So now let me just save my file, and here you can see this test is also passing. I also want to show you one more thing. Now let me go ahead and go to my package.json file, and here I'm going to provide a comma. Let's just provide our comma, and I'm going to just create yet another script which will be a test and then UI, and here I'm going to set that to vtest and then dash dash UI. So now if I save my file, and now let me just close this package.json file, I'm going to open my terminal once again and hit Ctrl+C to stop there. And now, let me just delete there. So this is click on that trash icon, and now we are going to be using npm run test and then :UI. So if I hit enter, so it's going to ask me like, do you want to install that? Yes, of course I want to install this. So I'm going to hit Y, so it's going to set that to yes, and now it's going to take a bit of time to install that. That's already done, and now let me just rerun that command one more time. Okay, so here you can see it's going to give us our test UI, which means like we can see the result of our test inside our application right here. And why is that? That's because now we install their dependency inside our project. And if you are using a vtest, so it will be available for you, but if you're using like Jest or Mocha or something like that, so it will not be available for you. So here you can filter your test, like you can click on the fail test if you want to check the skip test, if you want to check the pass one or the only test. So you can totally do that. By the way, if I click on this math utilities, if I click on there, here you can see it's going to give us the code. We can see the code, we can see the console values, and I'm not quite sure what the hell is this module crap, but yeah, this is also something. And we can also click on the report, and every test is now successfully passing. You know what, let me just break some tests. So I'm going to provide like, I don't know, maybe 5, and now if I save there, and here you can see one of our tests is now breaking. And which test is breaking? This test is breaking. So this test is passing. I can't even speak English no more. So this test is passing, and this test is passing, and this test is now failing. So here you can see it should sum two numbers, and we have our object.isEquality, so it is expecting 0, and we are now receiving or getting 4. So we can go ahead and go to the code, and now we can see our code right here inside this UI, or we can go ahead and go to our code. And now let me just fix that, save my file, and here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. So that's done, and that was our UI. If you prefer the UI, you can totally see your test result inside this UI, but if you prefer this terminal, you can also see the result of your test inside your terminal. So that's done. Now let's just test our multiply function. So I'm going to just create yet another test suite, and it should multiply two numbers. Come on, numbers. And here inside there, let's just provide our expectation and multiply, and let's just multiply 3 by 4, and to be, like the expected result to be 12. You can also provide another expect statement like multiply there, and here we can provide like -2 and 3, and the expected result to be -6. Okay, so let's just provide this, save our file, and here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. Nothing is broken right now. If I click on there, we can also see the code. Cool. So that was our multiply function. Let's just also create a test for our divide function. So it should divide one number by another. Provide our expectation. So let's just use our expect and provide our divide function, and let's just divide 6 by 3, and the expected result to be 2. And I'm gonna also provide like expect statement one more time and provide my divide function, provide 5 and 2 and the expected value to be 2.5. Okay, so let's just save there, and once again all of our tests are now successfully passing and everything is working the way we expect them to work. Let's just take care of that throw. I'm gonna go into that math utilities and also wanted to check for this error if we got there. So let me just show you another syntax. So I'll use like it should throw new error when dividing, dividing by 0, and here inside there let's just provide our expect, but in this case we are not going to be just calling our function. First of all, we are going to be using our arrow function, and then we have to call our function and provide our values like 5 divided by 0, and then we can use another assertion. And by the way, we are going to be learning a lot of them, but you don't have to worry about that. So let's just use our to throw, and division by 0 is not allowed. There we go. So now let's just save our file, and here you can see this list is now passing. That's totally working, and I guess that's going to be it. So this is how we are going to be creating our function, or we can create our classes, and then we have to just import there, and also we have to import the describe it and expect. And if you wanted to combine all of our test cases, so for that we are going to be using the describe function. And then if you wanted to create our test suite, so for that we are going to be using this it. And if you want to provide our expectation, so we are going to be using this expect. Then we have to provide some value and then the resulted value. And there are a lot of these to be and to be truthy and falsy, and there are a lot of things, but yeah, we are going to be exploring that in a few seconds. All right guys, so now let's make a setup for testing challenges or challenging testing, whatever you want to call there. So now let me just right click on there and open my terminal, and I'm gonna make it a bit bigger so you guys can see everything a bit better, like so. And now I'm gonna use like npm create read at latest, and I'm gonna choose, or first of all we have to give it the name of like testing challenges or something like that. I'm going to choose vanilla JavaScript, and I'm going to choose JavaScript. Now let me go ahead and go to their testing challenges, and I'm going to use npm I to install all of the dependencies inside there. So that's totally done. Now let me open there in my VS Code, and this is how it looks like. So I'm going to just remove the public folder, and I'm going to just remove this entire src folder. I'm going to recreate there once again. Now let me go ahead and go to that package.json file. And here inside the scripts, I'm going to just create another script for testing. So I'll just give it the name of like test, and here it's going to be equals to only the vtest. But first of all, we also have to install the vtest. So now let me just close there and open my integrated terminal, and I'm going to just write like npm I and then -d and then vtest. So it's going to install there as a dev dependency inside my project. So that's totally done. Okay, so now that's totally done. Okay, so now I can successfully use like npm t to run my test, or test would be fine. So I'll just use like npm t. So we don't have any test, so that's why it's going to give us an error. So now let me just stop there. Okay, so here are all the instructions that you have to read, and then give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and then I'm going to give you my solution, but at least give it your best shot. And I'm not going to read through all of that because it's going to waste a lot of your time, and this course is super huge. I don't want to make that no longer. So once again, read through all of that, give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely normal, and then come back and watch the solution. So now here is my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a file with the name of like mathutils.ts, not ts but js, and here we're going to be starting from the factorial. And by the way, if you guys don't know what a factorial is and recursion is and all of that kind of stuff, so you should definitely watch my JavaScript course and also my data structure and algorithm course. And you don't even have to know all of that stuff to follow along with this course, but I'm just creating these functions so that we can test there. So I'll just first of all create my factorial, and it's going to be taking a n as a parameter. And now inside there, let's just check if the number is less than 0. So in that situation, we are going to be throwing new error, and which will say like number must be non-negative. And now underneath there we have to just return like if the number is equal to 0. So in that situation, we are going to be setting there to 1. But if that's not the case, so we are going to be just multiplying there by using this recursion pattern. So if you guys don't know what this is, you don't even have to worry about that. But if you care about it, so you can definitely watch my data structure and algorithm course. And you know what, we also have to export this so we can use that in other file. Okay, so now let's just create our gcd function. It's going to also take the a and b, and now inside there we are going to be first of all checking if b is equal to 0. So in this situation we are going to be returning the a. So now let's just use that recursion once again, and we have to pass our b as a parameter, like as the first value, and then a mod b. Okay, so now here we also have to export that so we can use that in other file. And I can totally bet that this function which I'm about to write, you already at least heard the name of that, which is called the Fibonacci series. So I'll just give it the name of like Fibonacci, Fibonacci, and here it's going to take a number as a parameter, and inside there first of all we have to check if the number is less than 0. So in that situation we are going to be throwing that same error, like come on, throw new error, which will say like number must be non-negative, e.g. ATIVE, and now underneath there, if that's not the case, we're going to be creating a sequences. So sequen, and now for the first index we're going to be providing 0, and for the second one we're going to be providing a 1. Okay, so now we have to iterate over through there. So like let I is equal to 2, I is less than that number which you are now taking as a parameter, and then we have to just increment there. So let's just use like I plus plus, and now we have to get the sequence, and then we have to push that new number to there. So we are going to be using like that same sequence, and here we have to provide like I minus 1 plus the sequence, and then I minus 2 in this case. Now underneath it we just have to return the sequence, save our file, and these are all the functions that we are about to test. Okay, so now let me just hide this function and also this function. So now let me go ahead and create my test folder. So test, and now inside there we are going to be creating our mathutils.test.js file. And let's start from the first one. Let's just grab first of all the describe function, then the it function, then the expect function from the vtest, and now we have to grab our factorial function, factorial, from where? From let's just go into the src folder. Now inside the src folder we have our math modules. We have to grab the factorial, then GCD, and also the Fibonacci series. Now we have to grab that. Now that we successfully grabbed that, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to describe our test suite. So I'll just give it the name of like mathutils, and now here let's just remove them, and I'm going to be providing my first test case, which will be like it should calculate, and here we are going to be providing our expectation. So let's just pass our factorial to there, and if we specify 5, we want the result to be 120. And now let me provide another expectation, like if we got some sort of error. So I'll just use like factorial once again and provide my -1, and we want to throw a new error. So let's just use like to throw, and here we are going to be passing like number must be, come on, let's just go ahead and go to my mathutils, and I'm going to copy there from there. So let me just copy this entire thing from there. Now let me just paste that right here, save our file, and now I'm going to be using npmt to run my test suite, and here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. So that's done. Now let me test this GCD function. Okay, so now underneath there we are going to be creating another test suite, which will be like it should calculate calculate greatest divisor right here, and we have to provide our expectation, call our GCD function, provide 56 and 98 as a values, and we want it to be 14. I'm going to duplicate this line of code once again, and I'm going to change it to like 101 and also 10. So we want it to give us like 1. Now let me just save there, test there once again. So here you can see this function is also passing, or this test suite is also passing. So now let me just hide there, and the final thing that we have to do is that we have to test this Fibonacci series. Okay, so let's just create another test suite, and it should Fibonacci sequence sequence, and inside there provide our expectation, and then call our Fibonacci function and pass 5 to there, and we want it to be equal. And if you guys don't know what a equal to and then the throw means, we're going to be learning all of that in a lot of great detail. So now let me just pass like, if this is 5, so we're going to be getting like 0 comma 1 comma 1, and then 2, and then 3. Okay, and now let me just create another expectation for the error. So we are going to be passing like Fibonacci series, and if we pass like -1, so we want to throw a new error, like throw an error, and we want to say like let me just copy there from there, like number must be non-negative. I'm gonna copy there, and now let me just place it right here. I'm gonna save this file right now, and here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing, and that was it about our math module test cases. Let's talk about the AAA pattern in testings. So what do I mean by AAA? A mean arrange, A mean act, A mean assert. So how that's going to look like? This is how it's going to look like. So the first step that we have is arrange, and in this step we set up everything needed for the test, like variables, mock data, and etc. You don't know what a mock data is, but we are going to be covering that in a lot of great detail in this course. Then the next thing that we have is act. So act perform the action that you want to test, like for example calling a function or doing something. And the final step that we have is assert. So it verifies that the result of the action is what you expect. So you know what, let me just put that in more simple word. So imagine you are baking a cake. So in the arrange part, you are going to be gathering all the ingredients and tools you need, like for example the flour, sugar, eggs, mixing bowl, etc. And in the act phase, you are going to be mixing those ingredients together and putting the cake in the oven. And then finally we have the assert. So in this phase we are going to be checking if the cake is baked properly by cutting it and then testing it. So if the test good and is fully baked, you know your steps worked. So that was just a quick analogy about the AAA. So now let me just explain that in the coding. So arrange is when you gather everything you need for the test, and act is when you do the action you are testing, like calling a function or doing something, and then assert is when you check if the result is what you expected, like testing the cake to see if it's perfect or not. So the first step that we have is arrange, and in this step we are going to be collecting or setuping the data. So we have two variables like a and b, and both of them have the value of 1. And then we have the act phase, and in the act phase we are going to perform the action like calling a function. Here you can see we're now just combining both a and b and storing them inside the result variable. And then finally for the assert we have to verify the result. So we are going to be just providing what expect, and then we can specify our result variable, and then finally we want to expect some sort of a value from there. So we want to expect the value of 2, and this is how it's gonna look like. So you know what, let me just write some code, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. I will just remove all of their code, and by the way you can find all of their code in my GitHub repository. So I'll also remove that. And here I'll just provide like my test or it. I'm gonna use my it right here. Or you know what, let's just provide our test. What the hell? So it adds numbers correctly. Come on, numbers correctly. And the first part that we have is arrange, and in this part we are going to set up the data like so. So first of all, let's just create our variable like a, and a will be equals to 1, and then let's just create another variable with the name of b, and b will be set to 1 as well. Okay, so now outside from there, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to act. So like perform the action, for example like call the function or combine the value. So I'll just use like const result, and here is going to be equals to a and b. Okay, and now finally we have to provide our assert. So I'll use like assert, and here we have to verify the result. So I'll just use like my expectation. Let's just use our expect, and we want to provide the result variable, and we want the value to be 2. And now let's just save our file, test this out. We are now getting an error. That's because we have to import the test right here. So I'll just use test comma, and now here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. So that was our AAA pattern in testing. So you know what, let's just undo every single step. So let me just undo that. God damn it, that was a lot of code. And let's just undo that. There we go. So now let's just save our file, and that was it about for our math utilities. Let's just close there, and now we are going to be creating yet another file with the name of string utilities or string utils. So I'll just give it the name of like string utils.js, and I'm going to also create a test file for this. So I'll give it the name of like string utils test.js. There we go. And now here inside this string utils, we're going to be creating a few functions once again, and which will focus on the string. So I'll just go ahead first of all and define my const to upper case, and it's going to be equals to the string. And here inside there, let's just use our string.to uppercase. Let's just save our file, and I'll just duplicate that and change that to like to lowercase. And I'm going to also change that to lowercase. And here we are going to be creating yet another function for the reverse. So I'll use like const reverse, reverse, and it's going to take the string. And then outside from there we have to use like stir.split. We have to split this out, then reverse it out, and finally we have to join there so we can see all of our result. And now we have to create another function for the capital or for the capitalization. So I'll use like const capitalize, and I hope the spelling is correct. I'm not quite sure about that, but here we have to use our, or you know what, I'm not going to provide that curly braces, so I'm going to use like str dot char add or character add 0, and now we have to use the dot to uppercase and execute them. I'm going to just add my str dot slice of 1 and then the dot to lowercase right here. Let me just save my file, and that's totally done. Finally, let's just export this so that we can use that in another file. Okay, so this is how we are going to be exporting there. Let's just save our file and let's just go into our string utilities. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the describe, then we have to import the expect function, and then we have to import the it. That's done. We have to also import our to uppercase and also to lowercase and all of that stuff. So to lowercase and then capitalize, come on, not caption, capitalize, and also a reverse function from there. So let's just save our file. Now underneath there we have to create our describe, so let's just provide our describe right here, and string utilities would be fine. And inside there let's just provide our test suite, so I'll use like it should return string in uppercase. There we go. And let's just provide our expectation, and first of all we are going to be using our to uppercase and provide in lowercase hello, and we want the value to be uppercase hello. So now let me just save my file, and everything is running. Let me test this out. So here you can see we have another test suite, which means like we are now working with this file, and which is totally running. Now if I go ahead and go to my string utilities to uppercase, if I change that to like to lowercase, maybe lowercase, save my file. Here you can see our test is now failing, and you already know why it is failing. It is failing because now we changed this code and function does not behave as it used to be. So now let me just bring it back, and now it is working totally fine. I'm gonna also duplicate that and change that to like word, and here let's just change that to word, save our file. Yep, it is working once again. And now underneath there we have to create yet another test suite, so it should return string in lowercase. And now let's just expect to lowercase or function, and here we are going to be passing a hello in uppercase, and we want to expect that to be lowercase hello. And I'm gonna also duplicate that and change that to like lowercase word, like so, and we want to pass the word in uppercase. There we go. So let's just save our file, and here you can see our test is now successfully passing and nothing is going wrong. If I go there and change that to like to uppercase, come on, uppercase, there we go, save our files. You already know this is gonna give us that error right here because we changed this one line of code inside there. So yeah, that was it about for our expectation. Now let me just test that capitalize function. So it should capitalize first letter of string. There we go. Provide our expectation one more time, and here let's just pass our capitalize function and provide our hello inside there and to be, and we want the first letter to be uppercase and the rest of them will be lowercase. So that's exactly what a capitalize mean. I'm gonna duplicate that and change that to W in uppercase and word in lowercase, I mean like ORLD in lowercase. And here I'm gonna just only pass the word, and let's just save the character is not a function. What do you mean? Let me go ahead and go to my test suite. Oh, chat add, it should be car add, character add, and now our test is passing. Did you just saw that? I just made a typo and he told me that you are doing something wrong, Hussein. You gotta fix that. So this is exactly what unit testing does for us. So it should return string reversed. There we go. And provide our expectation one more time, and here we have to call our reverse function and provide our hello, and we want the value to be ole, like the reverse of the. So here you can see it is also passing, but if I just provide like hello, it will not pass because the expected value is hello and we are providing ole. Okay, so now let me just change that to ole one more time, and I'm going to also provide the final expectation. So let's just provide our reverse and provide a word inside there, and we want that to be DLROW. Draw. And yeah, our test is now successfully passing, and this is how we are going to be testing a string utilities, and we already saw that this is how we are going to be testing a math utilities like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and you name it. Next we are going to be testing arrays, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so that's done. Now let me go ahead and create another file for the string. Okay, so string utils, and once again, if you are curious like how in the world all of their functions work, you should definitely watch my data structure and algorithm course. In there we already cover like how we can reverse our string, how we can capitalize the word, what is a palindrome and reverse palindrome, and so on and so forth. So you know what, let's just start from the first one, which is called the reverse strings. So I'll just export that, and then we are going to be creating our reverse string function. Is going to take a str as a parameter, and inside there we only have to return the string.split method. First of all, we have to convert that to the array, then we have to reverse that array, like all of the content inside that array we have to reverse that, and then finally we have to join it back. So it's going to give us the reverse string. Now let me just save my file, and now underneath there we have to create here another function which will capitalize our word, like capitalize words, and it's going to be equals to this str. Like it's going to take a string, and we have to return our string dot replace, and come on, replace, and here we are going to be passing a regex which should look something like this. Now it's going to take a callback function, so we are going to be passing our character, and then character, come on, char dot to upper case. So we have to just execute our function on there. Now underneath there we have to use our export const, and then is palindrome, and it's going to be taking a string, and inside there we have to first of all create our clean string. So I'll just create my clean str, and here we have to use our str dot replace, and then we have to use our regex right here. And by the way, if you guys don't know what a regex is, you don't even have to worry about that. You can just definitely ask ChatGPT, and it's gonna give you all of their regex. Okay, so now we have to just call our two lowercase on there, and then finally we have to just return like if our clean string is equals to the clean string dot split, come on, clean string dot split method, and now we have to convert that to the array, and then we have to reverse it out by using this reverse function, and then finally we have to join that array back. So now let's just save our file, and these are all the functions that we are going to be testing right now. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and create a new file with the name of string utils.test.js. Okay, so now inside there we are going to be importing our describe function. We will also import the it and also the expect function, and now here we have to import our functions from where, from, or let's just go ahead and go to the src folder, and then the string utils folder. So I'll just first of all grab the reverse string and also the capitalized word, and is palindrome from there, is palindrome. There we go. Now let me just save there, and underneath there we have to create our test suite by using this describe. I'm going to give it the name of like string utils, utils. There we go. And now we have to define our first test case for reversing our string. So I'll just give it the name of like it should reverse a string. There we go. And now we have to provide our expectation and reverse the string, which is that function which we just created. So we are going to be passing like hello, and we want there to give us the result of what do we call it, ole. There we go. Now if I save my file, and here you can see our test is now successfully passing right here, and everything is working the way we expect him to work. So that's totally done. I'm gonna hide them, and now underneath there we have to create another test suite. So I'll just pass like it should capitalize the words, like the first letter will be uppercase and the rest of them will be in lowercase. So I'm gonna just pass my expectation and then the capitalized word function, and we're going to be passing like hello and then word. So we want there to give us like this first letter will be uppercase and the rest of them will be lowercase, and same will apply for this one, like the first letter will be uppercase and the rest of them will be lowercase. So now we are going to be using like to be, and here we have to just pass like hello and then word. Let's just save our file. Check this out. Here you can see all of our tests are now successfully working, but now if I change that to like in lowercase h, here you can see our test will now fail. So that's totally done. Finally, let's just test our palindrome. So it should check, come on, it should check for palindrome, and here we're going to be passing our expectation like is palindrome, and now we are going to be providing this palindrome like res car, and we want that to be true. Okay, just a true. And now let's just save our file, and here you can see it's going to give us their true right here. And if I just pass like maybe apple save, so it should fail our test. Now let me just convert that to the res car once again, and now we are going to be passing like another one is palindrome, and I'm going to pass like hello in this situation, and we want that to be false. Now if I save my file, and all of our tests are now successfully passing. So that was I don't know what the hell am I doing right now. That was our string utils test cases. Okay, so let's talk about how we are going to be testing arrays. All right, like arrayutils.js, and here we are going to be writing a lot of utils. So I'll just use first of all export const sum is going to be equals to this array, and here let's just use our array.reduce reduce function, and it's going to take the accumulated value and also the current value. So for the result, it's going to give us the accumulated value plus the current value, and the result, I mean like the starting point will be from the 0. So it's going to give us the sum of that array. And also let's just export one more. So find maximum value inside our array. Okay, so it's going to take that array, and let's just use our math.max function and spread out our array. So it's going to give us the maximum value from that array. We are going to be also using the find min value as well, like find the minimum value inside your array. So we are going to be using like math.min and spread out our array inside there. Finally, let's just use our const filter e1. Okay, so it's going to also take the array, and we are going to be filtering our array by using the filter method. And here let's just pass our callback function, and the parameter we're going to be passing a num, and if num mod 2 triple equals to 0, so which means like it's going to give us the e1 value. Okay, so now that's totally done, and these are going to be all of the functions that we are going to be testing right now. Close there, close this file, close that file as well, and create our test file, which will be arrayutils.test.js. There we go. And now inside there, let's just do our magic. The first thing we would need is a describe function. We would also need the it and also the expect. Now underneath there, let's just import our sum function. Come on, sum from where? From the, let's just go into the src, and inside there we have our array utils. We're going to be importing the sum, the find maximum, the find minimum, and also the filter e1. Let's just save our file, and let's just define our describe function. Okay, so here, what the hell did I just do? Provide the name of, or not the name but the label of array utilities. There we go. And let's just provide our first test case. We are going to be testing the sum function, so it should return correct sum of array. There we go. And provide our expectation, and let's just provide our sum value, and here we are going to be passing array. So let's just use like 1 comma 2 comma 3, and if we combine all of them or sum all of them, the result will be 3 plus 3, so it's going to give us 6. So we are going to be using like to be 6, like so. And I'm going to also provide another array, so I'm going to use like sum, and here let's just pass like -1 comma -2 comma -3, so it's going to give us the -6. So let's just use to be 6 minus 6. So now if I save my file and test this out, so here you can see this is going to be our string utilities. Let's just go into our array utilities. Everything is now successfully passing, and you already know why it is passing. It is passing because the resulted value is correct. But if I change that to like maybe 7, freak out, and it's gonna give us an error like, Hussein, what the hell are you doing? Fix this error, god damn it. So okay, fixing it, boss. So let's just test or another function, which is a find maximum value function. So we are going to be using like it should return the maximum value from the array. Okay, so let's just provide our expectation and find the maximum value and our array. So 1 comma 2 comma 3, and the maximum value we want to expect it to be third value, because that's the maximum value inside our array. Okay, so we are going to be also providing our expectation, find the maximum value once again, and use 10 comma 5 comma 100 comma 50. So once again, the maximum value we want to expect it to be 100. So let's just save our file, and still everything is passing, and we already know why it is passing. It is passing because the resulted value is 100. But if I change that to like 5, save my file, and now it's gonna freak us out. Okay, so now let's just test those final one. I mean like not the final one, but the find minimum one. So it should return the minimum. M-I-N-I-M-U-M, mini mom, mini and then my mom. So it should return the minimum value from array. So how that's gonna look like? Well, we have to provide our expectation and find the minimum, not the maximum. Find the minimum value and provide our 1 comma 2 comma 3, and we already know that the minimum value is 1. So let's just use comma, I mean like dot to be if I can type that today. So the minimum value is 1, and provide our expectation once again. Find the minimum value once again by using this array. So 10 comma 5 comma negative 2 comma 100. So I'll just provide like to be and negative 2. So let's just say our file, and it is giving us an error. Oh, it is coming from this one, so we have to change that to 100. I don't know why I forgot that, but yeah, everything is now passing the way we expect him to pass, and that's done. So next we're going to be working with objects. Okay, so that was our string util test. Now let me go ahead and create another file with the name of arrayutils not ts but js, and here inside there we're going to be creating three functions, which will be the flatten array, intersect array, remove duplicates array, and that's going to be add. So I'll just start from the first one, which is a flatten array, and basically we are going to be using this function in the upcoming video, in which we are going to be covering something called the design pattern, and we are going to be even building our own design system inside there. So we are going to be using this function to flatten our array. So we are going to be returning like array dot reduce function. Come on, let's just use the reduce, and here we have to just pass the accumulator and also the value inside there. And now we can use like array dot is array, which is a built-in function, and here we have to just pass the value. If that is the case, in that situation we are going to be getting like accumulated value, and then we are going to be concatenating. So concat this flatten array. So let's just use the recursion, which is called the flatten flatten array, and here we are going to be passing the value. But if that's not the case, in that situation we are going to be getting that array, and we are going to be concatenating this value inside there. And now outside from there we are going to be just passing this array, and that's going to be it. So that was our first function. Now let me just collapse there, and now we have to create another function which will just intersect our array. So we are going to be using like const intersect arrays. Is going to take the array of 1 and the array of 2. Inside there we have to return the array of 1 and use the filter on there and pass our item as a parameter. Now we have to get the array 2, and then we are going to be checking if it includes that item which we are now taking as a parameter. Okay, so it's going to intersect our array. So now let me just hide there, and the final function which we are going to be creating will be just to remove the duplicates. So I'll use like const and then remove duplicates, and here it's going to take the array, and here we have to pass our return, and then let's just make a clone of our new, and here we have to just use the set data structure, which will only gives us the unique values from our list or array. Okay, so it should remove duplicates, and now let's just save our file, and now we have to create our test suite for that. So now we are going to be using like arrayutils.test.js, and inside there we have to first of all import the describe function, then the it function, then the expect function right here. Underneath there we are going to be importing a lot of stuff from let's just go ahead and go to the src. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the src, then go to the array utils, and now we are going to be importing the flatten array. We are going to be also importing the intersect array, and finally the remove duplicates array. Now let me just save my file, and now underneath there we have to provide our describe, and here I'm gonna give it the name of like array utils, and inside they create our first test case, which will be it should flatten flatten a nested array, and inside there we have to pass our expectation like flatten the array. Inside there we have to just pass like nested array, so we want to provide like 1 and then 2 and 3. Now outside from there we are going to be providing a 4 and then like maybe 5 and then 6, and we want there to give us the result of this. Like let's just flatten there, so we are going to be getting like 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. And now let me test this out. So here you can see our tests are now successfully passing, and now it's going to give us the same result right here, like it will flatten our array. Now let me just hide them, and the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create another test suite for the intersect array. So I'll just go ahead and write like it should find intersection of arrays, and here inside they provide our expectation and provide our intersect array, execute there, and now we are going to be passing like 1 2 3, and then outside from there we are going to be passing yet another array, and we are going to be passing like 3 4 5, and we want it to be equal to only 3. So it's going to give us the intersection of the intersection secti. Oh, and there we go. Now let me just save my file, And here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. I'm gonna also hide them. And finally, we are going to be just removing the duplicates from the array. So we are going to be using like it should remove duplicates from the array. And here let's just place our expectation and remove duplicates. And now we are going to be passing some sort of a duplicates like 1 comma 2 comma 2 once again, and then 3 comma 4 comma 4. And we want there to give us the result which will look something like this, like 1 2 3 and 4. Now let's just save our file and test this out. So here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing, and that was our array test cases. So now let's talk about how we are going to be testing the object utils.js file. So let's just write object utils. We're going to be also creating object utils.test.js. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my object utils and create a few utils functions. So I'll use like const merge objects, and it's going to allow us to just merge two objects. So I'll use like object 1 and object 2. And here inside there, let's just use our spread operator and just provide our object 1. And every single thing inside the object 2, we want to just combine both of them. And it should be just obj, not with the e. So that's done. Now let's just create yet another one for the deep cloud. And if you guys don't know what JSON parse and JSON.stringify means, well, you don't have to worry about that. So I'll use like JSON parse and provide my JSON.stringify inside there, and provide my object value inside there, which we are now taking as a parameter. I'm gonna also create one for the deep equal, and it's gonna be equals to this object 1 and object 2. And inside there, let's just use our JSON.stringify and provide our object 1 inside there. If that is equal to the JSON.stringify and object 2, let's just provide our object 2. So it's going to give us the deep equal. Now I'm going to just provide my export so that we can use that in other file. That's done. Now let me go ahead and go to my test file and start testing. But first of all, we would need to import the describe function and also the it function and also the expect function. Okay, so first of all, we have to also import the merge object. Come on, MEA. I can get there today. Okay, there we go. So we have our merge object, we have our deep clone, and we also have our deep equal. Okay, so now we are going to be also importing that. Now let's just create our test suite. So I'll just provide like object utilities, utilities, there we go, and remove this second from there and provide my it statement right here inside there, and it should correctly, or it should merge two objects would be fine. And inside there, let's just create our object. So I'll use like object 1, and it's gonna just take like a, and that's gonna be set to 1, and it's gonna also take like b, and that's gonna be set to 2. Let me just duplicate there, and I'm going to just change the value to like, I don't know, this one will be 3 and this one will be set to 4, and this should be object 2. Now you want to merge there. So if you want to merge there, for there we are going to be using our merge object function, and we are going to be passing our object 1 and object 2 inside there. And now let's just store the inside some sort of a variable with the name of like merged. It's going to be equals to this value. Now let's just provide our expectation. So you want to expect the merged, come on, merged, there we go, merged to be equal to this object, like it's gonna have, come on, let me just save there. So it's gonna have like a, and a will be set to 1, and b will be set to 3, and c will be set to 4. Okay, so it will just merge both of these values. Now you might be thinking like, wait a second, it will not combine them. Well, of course not, because we use the spread operator and it's going to override those values. So a will be set to 1, b in this case is now set to 2. So now we are just merging them. So in this case, we are now changing the b value to 4. So that's why we are going to be getting, oh, I just realized that I made a mistake. So it's going to be set to b, and this one is going to set to c. Okay, so that's totally done. So we have a, which is now set to 1. Then we have b, which is now set to 3. Now we have c, which is now set to 4. Now you might be thinking like, Hussein, what the hell are you talking about? B is not equal to 3. B is equal to 2. So we are now merging these both objects. So in this case, b is set to 2, but now we are merging there. So now we are overriding that value from the b. So you know what, this is going to be our expectation. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see all of the tests are now successfully passing. So now we are working with the object test. If I expand there, so these are my code and this is my report. So also that's totally done. So now let's just create another test suite. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define like it should deep clown an object, and inside there let's just create our object. So I'll give it the name of like original, original. There we go, original, and that's going to be equals to the a, and a will be set to 1 and b will be set to a nested object which will have the c property and which will be set to 2. Now underneath there, let's just make a clone of that by using our deep clone function which we defined. So we have to specify our original inside there, and I'm going to store that inside the clone variable like so. And now here we are going to be providing our expectation. So we want to expect the original.b.c value, which means like that 2 value to be 2. So I'll use like to be, and here we have to specify 2, save my file, and here you can see our tests are now successfully passing, as you can see there right here. Okay, so that's totally done. But now if I want to like modify that original value, okay, so if I use like cloud.b.c value, if that is equal to 3, and here we want to use our expect statement, so let's just remove that and expect that and provide our expect, and here we have to specify our clone.b.c value to be 3. As we already know that we are now changing that value right here, and we are now changing that from 2 to 3, so that's why we want to expect that to be 3. So as you can see right here, all of our tests are now successfully passing, and that is something that we expected. So now underneath there, I'm going to use like it should correctly check deep equality between two objects. And now let's just provide a few objects right here. So I'll use like const obj1, and that's going to be set to the a property, and a will be set to 1, and b will be set to the c property, and that's going to be the value will be set to 2. I'm going to duplicate that like 3 times and change that to like object 2 and this one to object 3, and the values will be exactly the same, but expect from this one I'm going to change that to 3. That's done. Now what I want to do is that I want to use like expect expect and provide my deep equal function right here, and then we are going to be passing the object 1 and then the object 2 inside there, and that to be true. So it's going to give us the true value. Okay, and now let me just duplicate that and change that to false, and here we are going to be passing the 3 value, because here we are now changing the c value to 3, so we are now expecting that to give us the false value. So as you can see right here, all of our tests are now successfully passing. Change that to true, and now let me just save there. So it's gonna just fail our test, and that is something that we don't want. So yeah, that was just the basics of test. So we learn about the describe, it, expect, and we learn about the objects. We also learn about arrays, math in strings, and so on and so forth. Next we are going to be learning about the T